the Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio host, and nationally recognized safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Join us each week as we discuss the best and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. Follow Dr. Perrodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.
Hey everybody, it is your good friend the Safety Doc from down here in the North Star recording studio, where outside it's going to be a minus 20 wind chill tonight, and inside it is a brisk 57 degrees. Back in the green room, I've got our good friend John from Guns and Barbecue, who's going to be on in just a moment. But let's start out with just an appreciation here to all of you. We have 1,180 subscribers now to the Safety Doc podcast, which is triple what it was in fall. So thank you so much for following and subscribing to the show, sharing it with others. I appreciate that very much. So today's show it's a show I wanted to do for a long time, and I had shared this out with you, and I said, if anybody knows either an over-the-road driver, somebody really familiar with over-the-road driving, truck driving, let me know, because I think truck drivers got the short end of the stick when it came to essential versus non-essential workers, and I wanted to talk about that, and I found the perfect guest. So Jonathan Berger and I had a wonderful discussion. We put this outline together for the show, which you are going to love tonight. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring into our stream here our good friend Jonathan Berger. Jonathan, welcome to the Safety Doc podcast.
Pleasure to be on here. I really do appreciate the invite. Thank you.
So Jonathan said it is 77 degrees and sunny where he's at right now. So I'm like, wow.
Yeah,
that's a lot
I wish.
a lot different than right here, but I'm happy for you. And so the title of today's show is Truckers Getting Trounced, Essentially Forgotten Freight Haulers. And it's just mind-boggling to me as the pandemic on the onset of the pandemic, and who's essential, who's non-essential. First, that even happened, right? That we had a day when we all woke up and the government said you're essential or non-essential. And as I think about it more, I think there's this third category kind of coming in as like unessential, but this is just crazy stuff. So we're going to talk about how things impacted the trucking industry, and also what it looked like before the pandemic, what changes happened during the pandemic, and then if we could go back and kind of rewrite history, what could we do to make things different for truckers, especially in like March of 2020? I've got some ideas. When Jonathan and I talked, he had some ideas, so we're going to put that out there, and then anything you want to add in from the chat, please do it. So a few shout outs before we get going, and I go through introduce Jonathan formally on here is obviously subscribe to the channel. That's it's greatly appreciated, right? Subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up. We already have 16 thumbs up. Yeah, boy, I see so many people that I know, and also new people. Sast one too many, Bacon, Spam Bot Fodder, who's been in the last few shows, Alex Costello, who's also very familiar with the trucking industry, PNW Woods, NY Outcast, Gun Websites, Bacon Maldito, MK Joe, Solitude Surfer. I just said, man against the masses, so many. So thank you. Phil Henry is here from Germany right now. So wow, I definitely appreciate that. So let me read the introduction I put together for Jonathan, and then we'll get into it. So about Jonathan Berger. Jonathan Berger has a YouTube channel focused on Second Amendment activism and advocacy. His channel is called Guns and Barbecue, as he periodically tosses in content about his hobby of barbecuing. By the way, which makes me extremely hungry, and I could go for a brisket right now. If anybody wants to drop one off, you have to find where I live. But yes, if it's hot brisket, I'll go for it. He is a former armed security officer and corrections officer turned truck driver. Jonathan drove truck for just over 5 years before going blind. Shortly after losing his vision, he decided to start a YouTube channel. Jonathan remains well connected to the over-the-road hauler community and understands the lesser understood nodes along the OTR hauler networks. So again, I mean, thank you for being on the show. thank you very much, and welcome, Jonathan Berger.
I like I said, I do appreciate it. I'm glad that I could possibly be of assistance. If our phone conversation is any, idea of what is to come, then we're gonna, I think, have a pretty good show tonight.
Yeah, and we did that totally on a landline phone too. So just
Yeah.
everybody out there who's hip on cellular, it's not everything that's cracked up to be. But yeah, I completely agree. It was I'm sitting there just taking notes and so let's get into this. So I think people remember before the pandemic as this kind of utopian time, like everything was great and everything was great for truckers. But tell me, let's kind of get into some areas. So truck drivers. Things like where you eat, where you go to the bathroom, showers, places to overnight park, laundry, stuff like that. What did some of that stuff look like before the pandemic, before kind of 2020?
So pre-pandemic, now the most popular places were your truck stops, your big name areas such as the Flying J, Pilot, Loves, TA, Petro, all those. Now, if you were savvy at all, you'd start figuring out where the mom and pop truck stops were, because when you had trouble finding a place to park, oftentimes those were a great place to try and dig out. And plus, man, if you were looking for a place to eat or something, those were definitely going to be your better places to find. As far as showers go, there was a lot of different options. Again, your major truck stops, if you typically would fuel up and get 50 gallons or more for every 50 gallons that you would get shouldn't say every 50 gallons, but if you got 50 gallons or more of fuel at once, then you would get a free shower. So that's about how the showers work. There are some other ways. Remember being here in Northwest PA, and if I ever had to travel across 80, you go past the Embleton Truck Service Plaza, but right near there was a place that if you instead of turning left towards the truck stop, I guess if you turned right and went up the hill, something about exotic dancers, and they offered free showers for truckers. I never took them up on that. Yeah. So, I mean, there are places for drivers to get free showers. But I was one of those drivers where I drove flatbed. So if I could sleep at my delivery the night before, that's what I was doing. Then, I had to take a 30-minute break at some point during the day normally. And if I could tie that in to stopping and getting fuel, then running in, grabbing a shower and whatnot, just trying to maximize the time. So, when it comes to fuel and showers and whatnot, those kind of went hand in hand for a lot of drivers. The food aspect, over in Hubbard, Ohio, there is Burger King that I'm pretty sure actually has a truck drive-through, which became a big issue during the pandemic, unfortunately, which I'm sure we'll get into that as we move towards that. But, again, if you were keen and kept your eyes peeled, every once in a while you find something alongside the road, roadside barbecue stands that say, hey, truckers, pull off in here, and you be able to stop, grab a bite to eat. So, I mean, there was definitely options.
So what would you say of those of bathrooms, showers, places to park, laundry? Which was probably the biggest challenge before the pandemic of those?
Parking at night.
Okay, parking at night. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think this is something to recognize, because as I see this framed, and I shared with you before we started the show, there were articles that came out yesterday, two from Business Insider, two different authors. People are kind of looking at and saying, well, here's issues we have to address now with over-the-road haulers and truckers and things like that. But I'm like, there's more to this, right? Because you're saying, before this, we know that there weren't many places to park or enough places to park, and there were still issues with recognizing and appreciating over-the-road haulers. So before I get on with that, I want to give a shout out here to Spam Bot Fodder. I know with a name like that, you think it's spam, but it's not. I actually know this person. He said, I just subbed to Guns of Barbecue. Yeah, I encourage everybody to go over, right? And
Thank you.
If a Bacon, if you're in here, or Finesse, if you can drop the link, or I think MK Joe's already done it. Thank you so much for doing that. MK Joe, I'm going to make that the pinned tweet here. So let me just do the magic I need to do to make that happen here. So thank you so much,
MK Joe is a terrific guy. He's actually the one that got in contact with me. He's like, hey, Safety Doc's looking to talk to a truck driver. I was like, well, I'm not actively driving anymore for obvious reasons, but I figured, hey, I'll reach out to you, see if I could be of any assistance, and well, here I am.
Yeah, MK Joe's been absolutely great. So I do have it up as the pin tweet from MK Joe. So yes, that is Guns and Barbecue channel. So he needed 140 to get to 1,000 coming into this. So and your channel is terrific, right? So like every night as
thank you.
I'm working, like I've got 3 monitors in front of me on the right hand monitor. I'm like, is Guns Barbecue doing a show tonight? Yep. Okay, that's on over here. So yeah, I appreciate it, and get over there. Subscribe to Guns and Barbecue. Let's get him to 1,000. And I say that because you're going to rocket past 1,000. I mean, your content is so great, but
thank you very much.
So let's see if we, so right now, there's something else. It started in 2017. So truck driving before 2017, people are probably familiar with truck drivers need to keep logbooks of how much they drove, their breaks, and sleep, things like that. That changed in December of 2017. It became ELD, or electronic device. I don't know if it's load device. I don't know what the L stands for. But anyway, trucks that were manufactured after the year 2000 had to have this device on, which measured when the truck was in motion, how much time it was in motion. So tell me about this whole thing of ELD and what that meant for you as a trucker.
Well, there's a couple ironic things with the ELD mandate. One, it was a reason for a mass exodus of drivers. When I was driving, which it's been not quite 4 years since I was last behind the wheel of a semi, but when I was still able to drive, the average age of a truck driver was 55 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you're talking about an industry that is really needing drivers, and mind you, at that time, there was an estimated driver shortage of about 95,000 drivers at that time.
Okay, yeah.
So when this E-log mandate came out, you had a lot of drivers that been behind the wheel 20, 30 years said, I don't need no stinking computer to tell me how to run my truck.
Right.
And they hung up their keys, said, I'm done. And that made a big issue. So while there was a mass exodus of drivers who just said, I'm done, it still made a lot of issues, especially going back to that idea of parking at night, because now, in a sense, you had everybody starting at the same time and you had everybody ending at the same time. And it was a lot harder for guys to run the way they wanted to. Because if you had a hard time of, hey, this load needs delivered at 9 a.m., and with the way the company was setting up your stuff to leave and things like that, if you're a company driver, of course, if you were an owner-operator, you had a little bit more leeway. You can choose your loads, things like that. But with that being said, again, for company drivers, it really congested things, and it got to a point where after that E-log mandate went in place, you had to be in the truck stops by 3 p.m.
Well, 3 p.m. Okay.
To hopefully be getting a spot. By 4 or 5, you are probably parking along a curb somewhere. So that created a big parking issue. Then the one thing I always like to ask people is, what would you say if anybody came over to your house and said, hey, you need to go to bed right now?
Right.
You'd look at them like they're crazy. Like, what are you talking about? I'm my own person. I'm responsible for myself. I can tell if I'm tired or not. I can be safe, whatever the heck I need to do. And, I'll go to bed when I'm ready to go to bed. But that's not the way it works for truck drivers. Our government feels that they can just tell truckers when they're tired, when they're not tired, things like that. And the e-log mandate, again, really exacerbated things like that because what a lot of people don't realize is truckers have a 14-hour clock. Once that clock starts, it doesn't stop. And once that 14 hours is up, your day's up. So if you drove 6 hours or 11 hours, because you can only drive up to 11 hours in a day.
Okay, gotcha.
So you get 3 hours on duty time. And then with that 3 hours on duty time, 30 minutes of that is already eaten up by that 30-minute break that you're going to have to take at some point today. So really only have 2.5 hours free time because the government is like, 30 minutes of that is already taken. Good luck. So there's an issue there. So then when you move into, again, the driving, things like that, let's say I was going from my hometown here in PA, which, like I said, Northwest PA, and I was going to go to Omaha, Nebraska, for instance. That's about a 16-hour trip. Well, if I'm just driving straight through, I'm only going to use 11 and a half hours of my 14-hour on duty time because I've got 11 hours that I'm driving plus that 30-minute break. So you figure plus pre-trip and post-trip, we'll add in another half hour with everything if you're doing it the way DOT technically would like you to do. So you've been up for a total of 12 hours. Now, if you're trying to maximize your time, then what you're going to want to do is try and then, after only being up for 12 hours, go jump in your sleeper berth and go to bed. But how many people here can say, oh, yeah, after only being up for 12 hours, I can just go right back to sleep and, sleep like a baby and get a good solid night's rest and be up and ready to go and be able to drive safe the next day. So again, there's that issue where drivers are, we're not given the ability to run our lives. The government thinks that they've got to micromanage everything in that aspect. Now, the e-log mandate, this rolled out right before I lost my vision, and there were a lot of things circulating around with it. One of the things was you used to be able to just kind of creep along through places as long as you normally kept the truck under 20 or 25 mile an hour and didn't drive over 1 mile distance. Okay. So there was times you could, sneak around places if you had to without starting your clock. It was really nice. And then it was said that the e-log mandate, when that came out, DOT was hip to this, and they were going to make it where once the wheels on the truck moved, so I mean, if they turned, eighth of a turn, it would automatically kick your truck on duty. So, and that created another issue because now, let's say you're somewhere where, hey, I ended up having to park along the curb. I didn't want to, but there was nowhere to park. My time was up. It was either violate federal law or it was, park here. So I chose the latter, and now I've got a police officer knocking on my door saying, hey, you need to move this. Oh, well, great. I'm 8 hours into my break, and now I've got to go move my truck. And the second I move it, now I've got to go and restart my 10-hour break. So, like I said, I was just 8 hours into it, but now everything got messed up because I had to go and move my truck. And with the way the new e-log system and the systems that are tracking everything work, like I said, that kicks you on duty and you're, for lack of better terms, hosed at that point. Right. So now you're stuck doing an 18-hour break. And I'm sorry, but who here can sleep for 18 hours? So now you are already asleep for 8 hours. You got some cop knocking on your door. Hopefully he doesn't give you a ticket, which I've experienced this. And I was given a $200 fine because I parked in front of a sign that said no parking. I didn't have a choice. It was that or violate federal law. And, well, you choose the lesser of two evils. But so I go and, now drivers are having to, like I said, now you're stuck there doing an 18-hour break. Well, now, you're already behind the 8 ball. You're trying to catch up, things like that. You've been up for how long now when that 10 hours finally ends, and now you're driving tired again. And there's a lot of things that the government with the e-log mandate didn't take into effect. What they really did take into effect is that it was supposed to be cost saving for the industry. Right. I believe the number was $1 or $2 billion in paperwork that it would save. That's what the bottom line was money. It wasn't about drivers or their safety or well-being. It was about saving money in paperwork.
That's crazy. I'm going to bring up that article right now, Jonathan. So this is and by the way, people have been posting in the chat and have been asking, hey, how can I subscribe to Guns and Barbecue? And I do have it as the post as the pinned tweet by MK Joe. So just check that out. So thank you so much. So this is the article yesterday from Grace Dean from Business Insider. Truckers say electronic device that measures the hours, what you're talking about, the ELD, they drive each day, sometimes leaves them stranded just 30 minutes from home. So, going through this, it's like, hey, this is, getting kind of crazy for us, right? Mm-hmm. So what is your thought if this truck driver right here he's saying, hey, like, because of this ELD, sometimes like, I'm 30 minutes from home and suddenly, it says your time is up and whatever. So again, this was posted just yesterday by Business Insider. Help us to understand a little more of how this works and how it probably worked before 2017 with paper logs and.
Yeah, because even before 2017, there's electronic logs and, but the electronic logs that I ran with the company that I was with, they weren't electronic logs in the true sense that they have electronic logs now. I mean, everything was monitored electronically. It was done by the truck. I'd have to go in manually and put in if I was going off duty or sleeper berth, which you still have to do. But there would be times where I would be getting close to home and I'd be like, man, it's going to be really close here. And at least when I was driving, there were some tricks that we could do. A buddy of mine had figured out that, oh, hey, if you pull over and just restart your Qualcomm, which we figured out it took about 7 minutes to have the Qualcomm restart. And then once you hit that button to restart it, you just start driving again. And it's not picking up anything. So we would log off duty and start driving again. And then when it starts if we're still needing a little bit more time, when it starts getting close, pull off on the side of the highway. Hopefully we're at least to the ramp that we wanted to make it to, and do the same thing, restart the Qualcomm again. And normally that could buy you enough time to get home. Now I was fortunate enough where I lived about 15-20 minutes from a rest area. So if I was running that short, I could park at one of the rest areas and have my children's mother come pick me up and take me home, which was nice. And then just, leave the truck at the rest area all weekend. There was other times where I was just like, I'm going home. And you would just call into your safety department and say, hey, I went to park at the truck stop here, and you'd make it look good. You would actually pull off into the truck stop and drive real slow, because they can monitor all of that with the different sensors that they have on the truck and GPS and everything else. I mean, there's so much they can check out. So I would just pull off real slow and go through the truck stop and be like, man, there is no parking. I had to, I had to violate my hours and go home. It was typically going over by 5 minutes, and sometimes they would give you a slap on the wrist. Sometimes they would take a $100-some bonus from you, depending on who you were and if you were a habitual offender, things like that. I'm really sorry about my dog whining here. But so there was issues like that, and if even today. I don't think that Qualcomm trick that I was talking about works anymore. And Qualcomm's just one of the brands of e-logs. But yeah, I think it was figured out, and that bug, you could call it, was done away with.
Right.
But for a lot of guys, it's a choice. Do you violate your hours and go home, or do you not? Because at that point, if you're 30 minutes from home,
Right.
you knew a couple hours ago that you probably weren't going to make it, and you were going to stretch it. So, and at that point, you're rolling the dice then. And if you're going to violate by 30 minutes or so, if DOT catches that, whether it's when they are just pulling you over for a random inspection, or they could be doing an audit of your company's logs, which there's guys that get hemmed up later on because DOT comes in and does an audit for some reason, and they just happened onto something, and this guy had a violation, and then they want to go back and hit you for a log violation from a year and a half prior.
What's the consequence of that? So what's the consequence for you and maybe like for your employer? And how are you told about that ahead of time, of saying, hey, Jonathan, if you aren't compliant with ELD, here's what could happen to us, here's what could happen to you? Or is it something that's less talked about in the industry? Or tell me about that.
So as far as the auditing, I'm not exactly sure how that goes. Being a company driver, didn't really have to worry about it. Now, you're supposed to keep your logs for minimum 2 years, and the company keeps them for that long as well. And I remember there was one time my Qualcomm went down, and I got to run paper. And there might be a bit of a reason that the FMCSA wanted drivers to be on e-logs, because when I got to run paper, I mean, there should be a statute of limitations. There's definitely no more logs for me floating around out there to worry about. So as far as DOT's concerned, I'm just blowing smoke. But I may have done some sketchy stuff, and the company that I was working for, there was a load that I was on, and I was like, hey, I'm not going to make this. They're like, well, you are on paper right now. And I just said, say no more. And they knew I would run. And for the next 2 weeks, they took full advantage of that. And I was happy to do it too, because it was good money. But it's really easy to cheat paper. And that creates a bit of an issue. But again, it went back to I drove responsibly. I was able to make decisions that, I was able to say, hey, I'm not tired. I can keep running. And likewise, if I was tired, I shut down and I was responsible. But yeah, so it was funny because it was several months later, the safety department called me. They're like, hey, we're missing some logs from when, when your Qualcomm was down. And I was just like, hey, so-and-so, you don't want to see those. He's like, what? I was like, trust me, you don't want to see those. And having the position that I did there, being a top runner, things like that, things were overlooked. Like I said, if you were a guy that ran, you made money, you didn't violate things all the time, things like that. They took care of you because you took care of them. And I emphasized again, you're not going to want to see those. And he said, say no more. And that was that, it was never spoken of again. But as far as violations go with DOT, even with e-logs now, you'll get fined of some sorts. You'll get points on your CSA score, which could adversely affect any employment in the future. The CSA score, some things I think
the CSA score?
It's just this. I don't want to say made up, because I mean there's a rhyme and reason to it. It's basically I'm trying to think of exactly what it stands for. Something safety. Anyways, it's supposed to be representative of how safe you are as a driver.
Okay, sure.
So, do you have any accidents, speeding tickets, any other moving violations? Do you have any violations with your logs, etc.? And the more severe, the higher the infraction would be. And it's a way for companies to take a quick look at a driver and go, ooh, we don't even want to waste the time interviewing this guy, or make them go, oh, wow, this guy's been driving for X amount of years and he's got a 0. We definitely want to talk to this guy. So likewise, companies have CSA scores, things like that. And those scores are actually open to the public, which gets a little funny, because you'll have people that are looking to scam companies, and they'll look for companies that have a higher CSA score. And, all of a sudden something happens with them and that company, and, court settlements happen, and it's really unfortunate. Or what's even worse is they'll just call and say, hey, your driver just did this to me, and they'll just dish out money.
So is that where they have the thing on the back of the truck saying, dial 1-800, whatever?
How's my driving?
How's my driving? Okay, that is crazy. I'm adding this to stream. So this is the CSA website. Yeah, so driver safety education. And I didn't know that, right? That you could, or right, if someone is doing a concerted effort to try to decrease their ability to have employment in the future, they could just contact and make a report here. So, oh my God, that's okay.
And like I said, the bigger issue is people that, because you might see Swift truck going down the highway. Well, if you happen to look up Swift CSA score and went, oh man, they're terrible, you could just call in and be like, hey, your driver just ripped off my mirror. And I'm not saying that Swift's going to just give you money, but chances are, if you're just willing to say, hey, here's a bill, and I'm not going to sue you guys, all that, send me $500. They're just going to send you the $500. And meanwhile, you never did a thing.
Oh my God. That is horrible.
It is.
That is. Wow.
So the CSA scores can be really good, but there's people that have figured out that there is nefarious use for them.
So we have a question, Jonathan. It's from DJ Play Night. So DJ, thank you for submitting this question. And he's asking, how common was or is it to flaunt regulations as barbecue and drivers here have indicated, such as logbooks? I guess, how common was that in the industry to modify the logbooks?
From when it was paper, if you talk to old school driver, he would tell you about the 3 logbooks he kept.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. So it was a very commonly known thing. And every once in a while you get DOT officer that was like, yeah, I like this one that looks good, but I want to see the other one that you have. And you kind of be like, all right, fine. Now, when it came to e-logs, it made it a lot harder to cheat. But at the same time, back when I was still, before the e-logs became what they are today, back when I was driving and the e-logs were what they were, there was still a lot that you could mess with those, where they didn't like you doing quote-unquote edits to your e-logs, but if you looked at my e-logs, I edited all the time. Part of that was just because I would get to a customer and I would get out, get unloaded, and then if I'm waiting on another load or something, I'm just chilling out. And if I forgot to mark myself off duty or something, I'm sitting there on duty that whole time. Then I've got to go in and edit it and make it correct. So there's times where I'm editing to make corrections. There may not have been times where I was editing to, try and squeeze out every last minute that I could to make sure that I made it home.
Wow. So 2 things come to mind before we move on to our next section. And one is, have you seen the movie Smokey and the Bandit?
Yes.
Okay. So yes. And I definitely think, Jonathan, you would participate in that to try to get the Coors, yes, where it needs to go within the set amount of time. All right, so Smokey and the Bandit, and yeah, obviously the Cannonball Run. But wow, okay, so those were the 2, Smokey and the Bandit and Cannonball Run. So let's move on to this is excellent. Thank you so much. during the pandemic. So really, it's kind of March of 2020 is when everything just kind of falls apart in the U.S., right? So it was actually on March 13th, 2020, that the U.S. Department of Transportation issued an emergency relief declaration for truck drivers. And a few things that they put in that declaration is one is, if you have your credentials and they're expiring, just keep on driving. Like, don't worry about having to renew them. Just keep on driving. Second one was, don't worry about the 30-minute break. If you're driving 11 hours, like, you don't have to take a break. And there were many others, but one of the other things was the 60-70 rule, which I'm not very familiar with, and maybe you can help enlighten us on that. But so basically, I'm going to just kind of encapsulate this from my non-truck driver perspective, but it is March of 2020, and the government's saying, hey, truck drivers, like, you can carry more, you can do longer hours because you're an essential employee. And if anything was kind of ancillary, if it was kind of related to medical needs or essential needs, if you're carrying that cargo, go for it. And so I'm looking at this and saying, okay, like, what I want to get from you right now is just what your perception was of that for 2020. And then, the thing is, this really strikes me because I did a search, and I'm trying to find, like, so what was happening in 2020, March of 2020, for truck drivers, like, from the government. And I only found one article, and it was from Arizona, where Arizona took two waysides that had been closed, and they started them back into operation and limited hours and said, hey, truckers, come here. We've got bathrooms. We've got some food for you and stuff like that. But I'm like, holy smokes, like, that's completely insufficient.
Yeah.
But anyway, I want to get your perspective on what changed during the pandemic. What then were truckers, I don't know, either allowed to do or told to do? And then we're going to kind of break. And also, like, what changed as far as, like, places to eat during the pandemic, places to use the bathrooms, places to use a shower, laundry, lodging. So tell me about when the pandemic. What happens then?
So you brought up the hours of service, the waiving of the 30 minutes break, all those things, and it's ironic that the government waived those things when those things are in place because they're supposed to be. I'm really sorry about that.
Well, it's okay. It's okay,
man. Let's say
we have pets. We love them, man.
Yeah,
so they're all welcome.
But all those things are supposed to be in place as safety measures. But this happens, and those things are no longer safety concerns. That in itself seems a little contradictory. As far as sorry, what?
Oh yeah, completely. Like, they're saying, we have these ELD, and we have these restrictions in place, or these guidelines, these mandates. And by the way, we're going to waive those during a pandemic. And part of it was like, right, so it's fatigue and all of these issues. And it's like, no, just like, so I just found this huge irony, right, that all of these efforts to increase safety were relaxed during the pandemic, and nothing kind of put in place then to replace that or bolster safety. But yeah, that's it. And so please, like, tell us about how the 30-minute rule changed, a 60-70 hour rule, what that means.
And the ironic thing is, because if you're going to use the excuse of, oh well, there was less vehicles on the road, we didn't have all the other drivers, which I had a safety director that used to put it to us this way, and that is, you're a professional. When you get a CDL, you're getting something on your driver's license that, that marks you as being a professional at this. And nowhere else do you go. Do you get to go on the basketball court with LeBron James? You don't get to go on the football field with Patrick Mahomes. As an amateur, you don't get to do that. And as a truck driver, you're a professional where there's a bunch of amateurs in your playing field. And so if they're going to use the excuse, well, there was less vehicles on the road, things like that, that's why we could relax. Well, at that point, you're restricting the wrong people, because the people who are professional, who are the ones that are able to do this in a safe manner, are the ones that you're penalizing. So, like I said, there's a contradictory element there.
Right.
And a little known fact, 85% of accidents involving a tractor trailer and what we'd like to call a four-wheeler, just, your standard grocery getter or whatnot, 85% of those accidents are the fault of the person in the four-wheeler.
I didn't know that. Oh my God.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, it seems like maybe the government, again, if we're saying these measures are for safety, perhaps we should be looking at where we're actually placing the safety measures and on who. So, as far as when 2020 happened, I remember here in PA, our governor shut down all the rest areas.
Right.
So, what was already a hard thing to do, such as finding parking, became even harder. A lot of the truck stops wouldn't let you inside to do any business. It was just at the pump, getting fuel, things like that. So all of a sudden, your basic amenities of, grabbing a shower and a cup of coffee in the morning or something like that, going and, doing laundry, those became a very hard task. And if you were a driver that was on the road for 3, 4, 5 weeks at a time, you're not keeping 5 weeks worth of laundry in your truck. One, that's weight. And at the end of the day,
Right.
you're trying to limit how much you're carrying as possible. That way you can carry more on your truck. So if you're carrying 5 weeks worth of laundry, then, while that might only be a couple hundred pounds, that's still a couple hundred pounds of freight that you're not carrying. So that created a bit of an issue. Like I said, getting food, that became a big issue. Going back to that Burger King in Hubbard, Ohio, they stopped the truck drive-through, and they wouldn't let drivers just walk through the drive-through. And of course, all the lobbies were shut down, so they couldn't go inside and order. So, guys were just having to flag down motorists and be like, hey, can you go through the regular drive-through here and, get me this or that, which my buddy was telling me, he actually did that a few times there. And there were several amazing people who said, hey, I'm not taking your money. What do you want? And they
Nice.
they buy their lunch or something like that. So that's pretty awesome
nice.
there. But it still creates a big issue for drivers when you can't find those things. And now not only are you having to pack maybe extra clothes, but now you're having to pack extra food. And the thing is, how much extra food can you really take? You can get, if you are fortunate enough to have a microwave and things like that in your truck, then there's things that you can take along with you, like microwavable soup, things like that. But at the end of the day, do you really want to live off those for several weeks? Stuff like that gets old. So, not only that, but trying to find anything in the grocery store was getting tough. There's so many things where our infrastructure got stretched thin, but drivers were just told, suck it up, go do your job.
That's horrible. So your access to places to eat is restricted. Bathrooms, showers, laundry, and so I'm going to add in this other part too. So you deliver a load, and there's something called the lumper or lumping, right?
Yes.
Which is the person or persons responsible for taking the load from the truck into the warehouse, for example, or the loading area. But that changed during 2020 during the pandemic. So tell us about lumper, what a lumper is, and then also how this whole thing changed. And then also, because if the driver was doing the role of the lumper or transporting the goods from the vehicle to the warehouse, they were getting paid for that. But that wasn't happening in the pandemic. So, tell us about that.
So I'd always like to mess with guys. I drove flatbed for 5 years and absolutely loved it. And when I had trainees, they'd ask me, "Oh, what's the difference in you if I drove van?" I'm like, "Well, if you want to drive van, you just want to sit there and open doors and hold a wheel, then you're going to get paid accordingly. If you want to do work, then you're going to get paid accordingly." And there's van drivers out there who unload their own trailers, and they get paid accordingly, and they make some good money doing it. And when the pandemic happened, now lumpers have always been a thing, and what a lumper is somebody that you pay to unload your trailer for you. Okay. Now, from what I understand, costs will vary. There's no set standard, but it can be anywhere from, I've heard, as low as $200 upwards of $600-$700, depending on where you're going and what the freight is, things like that. And it also depends on are they pulling up a bunch of pallets? Is it loose pick? Things like that. So it'll vary. But when the pandemic happened, now you didn't have a choice. Places, they weren't letting you in. Now, there is always an issue, like say you were at a customer and you wanted to go in and use their bathroom. A lot of places wouldn't let you do that because, unfortunately, in this industry, believe it or not, there are people who are slobs. We're just going to throw it out there. There's some people who are slobs, and they would go into a customer's bathroom, and they decide to take a bath in the sink or something. They leave a bunch of dirty water droplets all over the place and all over the floor. Or you'd be like, you're supposed to sit down when you do that, but you got it everywhere, and they don't clean it up is the problem. And then the customer has to pay one of their employees to go in, clean up after this nasty individual. And so what their solution would be is, all right, no more truck drivers using this bathroom. And so that became a problem even before pre-pandemic. But once the pandemic happened, even the places that were nice enough to let you use those facilities wouldn't let you. And then going back to the lumper aspect, the places that would allow you to unload your own truck before, because again, we'll just say an average of $400 for a lumper. If you're saving yourself $400,
right,
each trailer load, that's $400 in your pocket. So now you're having to go and you don't get that choice. It's just, you're going to pay that lumper $400. You don't get to unload your trailer and you don't get a say in it, which there's some places pre-pandemic that were like that. They're just, you'd have to pay the lumper. And at that point you'd have the choice. Well, I'm not paying the lumper. I'll just take this load back. Or you just say, all right, well, I'll pay him this one time and I'm never picking this load up again. So there was things like that. But so let's say you're a company driver and your company pays you, say, $250 to unload the trailer. Well, they're still saving $150 by you unloading that trailer rather than the lumper. Okay. Well, if they've got to pay the lumper $400 now, well, guess who's not making that $250? That's the driver.
Right.
So
driver. Absolutely.
Now that's not only are you without amenities, you're having trouble finding food. You're being told all these measures that are for your safety and everybody else around you. We're just going to waive because the freight getting from point A to point B is far more important than your safety. Now you're losing income. And for some of these drivers, they would unload 3-4 trailers a week. So you're talking somewhere between $750 and $1,000.
Right.
That they're losing out of their pocket a week.
So that's something, Jonathan, if I'm correct. So during the pandemic, places were saying, stay in the truck, because if you come over here, then we don't know, or what we're being told by our safety folks for cross-contamination and things like that. So they're saying, stay in the truck. You're like, hey, so this is $1,000 out of my pocket this week because I'm being told to stay in the truck and someone else is taking the freight off. Oh my God, that's crazy.
Well, and the crazier thing about it is, literally what they're telling these drivers to do now is you back up to the door that you're supposed to be going to. You'll get lined up with it and whatnot. You'll go open your trailer doors, leave the bills of lading on the floor of the trailer, back up to the door that you're supposed to be bumping now, bump it. Then you have to call in and say, hey, I'm ready for you guys to unload me. And then they'll unload you, do all that fun jazz. and then they just leave the bills after you're all done getting unloaded, signed, and leave them right on the floor of the trailer. Which I'm still like, well, if it's that big of an issue, I feel like you'd be worried that hey, he just touched those. What if he coughed on him before he decided to lay him on the trailer? I mean, I'm sure there's some vindictive driver out there. We're not all angels. So I'm sure there's somebody that was like, I'm not feeling well today. I'm coughing on these. I'm tired of this crap.
Right. It's just crazy, right? Or did they use some like UV light dance they were doing when they did in this, and they sprayed it down with Lysol, and you come in and you're like, oh my God. So, I want to share a post by Alex Patino. Alex said he was at a Wendy's in St. George, Utah, and they closed everything and could not even order Uber Eats or walk through at the drive-through. So so this stuff gets crazy, and and so so I think what we've established so far is like there were issues prior to the pandemic that were interfering with the efficiency of truck drivers, such as not enough parking spaces. Was one, the ELD system, which electronic device, so monitoring when the truck was in motion, that went in place in 2017. That still has some issues to be worked out with it. So let's get into this. You were telling me the story about I think it was you couldn't find any place to park, right? And the ELD system is shutting you down and it's saying, hey, you got to take your break now. Or you got to rest now. And you parked underneath or close to a sign that said, hey, here's a $200 fine if you park here. You woke up in the morning, you checked, and I guess underneath your windshield wiper, there's a fine for $200. Tell me about that process, because this is, and it's actually an article that was released by Hannah Towie of Business Insider yesterday, and she said, hey, this whole thing of like infrastructure and stuff, like, that's great, but we don't have places for truck drivers to park, and they're getting these fines. They're not going to go to court and fight these because it would mean they have to take a day off of work to fight a $200 fine. This doesn't make sense. So tell me about your thoughts on this.
So I was running down through Virginia, and I was by the time I got stopped, I was just outside of Troutville. Now there was 3 big name truck stops. One was a TA, I think. The others were a Flying J and a Pilot along the way. And I had stopped at each of those with about, I don't know, probably an hour, maybe 45 minutes left on my clock. And every one of those was packed. And of course, like so many truck stops nowadays, they had signs up along the curbs and whatnot saying no parking here, et cetera, et cetera. And I was finding by that time, if a truck stop had that sign up, chances are you're going to get woken up in the morning. And sometimes it was by local PD that was coming around and waking you up. Sometimes it was just a worker for the truck stop coming out saying, hey, you can't park here, scram. Which, I mean, if you're getting woken up at 5, 6 a.m. to move your truck, the nice thing was by then there was parking. But the last thing you want to do is try and friggin' park semi in a tight spot when you're 3/4 of the way asleep still. So that's a little rough. But so I check out all 3 of these truck stops, nowhere to park. I'm like, So I had a little truck stop pocket guide, I think is what it's called. It's actually a neat little handy book because it goes by state alphabetically, and then it's got the different interstates in that state by numeration. So say you're in PA, it might start off with I-79, then you'll have I-80, then I-81, and there's different other ones in there. So but if you were looking for a place, that's how I would find a lot of the mom and pop truck stops that I did. Okay. Was using that book. So I had pulled that out because I was like, I'm getting down to the nitty gritty here, and it's like, oh, hey, at this mile marker, there's a rest area. I'm like, okay, cool. I was like, I'm not going to hold my breath, but cool. So I am getting down to the rest area, and by the time I get there, I've only got minutes left. and there's one spot that I can parallel park in, but it's going to put me smack dab in front of a no parking sign. Well, I've got two options. I violate this local ordinance,
Right.
or I violate federal law.
Okay.
Which one has more weight? Which one's going to have a more adverse effect on my job? So I naturally go with the lesser two evils, and I park in front of the sign along with about 8-9 other drivers who are doing the exact same thing because there's not enough parking.
Okay.
And sure enough, 7 a.m. comes around, and I get the old pound on the door, and they never do it nicely. I mean, when I say pound on the door, you think they're trying to break into the truck. And after the first or second time that ever happens, you just kind of get used to that sound. You're like, oh crap.
Right.
So I leave my sleeper berth, which now technically I'm supposed to be logging on duty. And there's a Virginia State Trooper there, and he's like, you need to move your truck, blah, 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 and all this fun jazz. And, yep. And sure enough, he gives me a $200 fine. And, I'm talking to him. He was nice enough to actually talk to me. Most of them just hand you your ticket and, move on to the next. And he's like, oh, it's a big safety issue, and you've seen as many people dead in accidents along these ramps. I'm like, I've been at it for 5 years. Right. Never seen one accident along a ramp for a rest area, let alone, I was like, okay, I feel like you're grasping at straws, but, $200 fine later. And at that point, you got the option. You can try and go back in court to fight it, which, it's just a parking violation. So there's no points on your license. It doesn't get you any CSA score. It's just a matter of, do you want to pay $200 fine? Well, right. It's at that point, I was usually pulling in about $300 a day on average driving truck. So if I decided that I didn't want to pay that $200, just say based on principle, well, that meant that I was going to lose money that day because I'd have to eventually get back down there. So it'd either be taking a day off of work and telling my company, hey, I've got to go and fight this, or getting them to get me down in that area, then, calling an Uber to come pick me up and take me to the courthouse, and then paying an Uber to go back. There's all kinds of headaches. Either way, you're going to lose more money than the ticket was worth. And the thing is, they know what they're doing, but they don't care. They don't care that you don't have enough parking. All they're worried about is the revenue. It's, in a sense, it's legal extortion.
It is. I'm going to bring up an article right now. So this one is from yesterday. It's by Hannah Towie, again from Business Insider. So I don't know what was happening, Jonathan, yesterday at Business Insider, but they're like, hey, you got to come in on a Sunday. You got a hell of a lot of stuff for you to do, and it's focused on truckers. But so the headline here is truck drivers say President Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure plan overlooks parking at critical need for breaks and sleep, which you've just indicated. So this article says that, and it says, for years, truck drivers have said there just aren't enough places to park. And so we end up parking in places where we know there's a high likelihood of fines. And then, as you kind of indicated too, there's this burned, or maybe it wasn't the discussion we had, there's this kind of burned bridge between truckers and maybe parking at some places because they've left a jug of urine out in, the parking lot that somebody has to clean up, or bag of garbage or something like that. But ultimately, I'm going to just bring this article back up. Is this really hits it on, the nail on the head, because it's saying, well, yeah, we can improve bridges and roads and things like that. But if we are transporting as a society, right, and we're becoming more of an Amazon type society of transporting things by truck, over the road hauling, we have to provide places for people to park the trucks, right? And not that they're going to wake up and be like, oh my goodness, I have a $200 ticket or something else has happened. And this bill did not include that. So I thought this was a very timely article. Again, it was yesterday, to make people aware of this. So so yeah, your experience with that, I think, is spot on, right? Because I drive down the interstate, for example, and I look and I see the sign and it says, I don't know what this means, by the way. It says like 22 and then like maybe 30 or something. I don't know if it's 22 occupied, 30 open. And
Oh yeah.
And we have truck drive. We have these waysides where truck drivers can stay overnight. But I'm kind of looking at that and thinking there should be like a lot of spaces, right? Because it's just opening up more land. It's just making these spaces available. But yeah, I don't think people realize that, for truck drivers to find a space to stay overnight is difficult. And weren't you saying like, for example, if it was a Dollar General or Home Depot, maybe truck drivers can, if they're delivering there, maybe they can also, stay over.
Yeah, there were some tricks to it. Okay. So one, when I first started truck driving, the company that I was with, I was on a Dollar Tree dedicated account. So if I was for some reason going to be finding myself in a bit of a pickle and I needed a place to sleep, I could, maybe pull over real quick and Google the closest Dollar Tree and then just go park there if it wasn't going to be very far. And if anybody come up and said, hey, you can't park here, because a lot of shopping centers now, Walmarts, things like that, which, I mean, you'll sometimes find Walmarts, Dollar Trees very close to a Walmart. And, if they have no parking signs for trucks or anything like that, and, they'll kick you out, have your truck towed, things like that. But if you're able to go, hey, I've got a delivery with Dollar Tree at, 4 a.m., then they leave you alone. And likewise, when I was driving flatbed, we would deliver all the time to Lowe's and Home Depot, things like that. So, that was another great aspect where I could just, once I started driving flatbed, I could look at places like Lowe's and Home Depot and be like, okay, there's plenty of these around. I can just pull off at one of these. But, not all drivers have that luxury, going back to what you're talking about with, parking at some places like that, such as Walmart. Unfortunately, like I stated before, some drivers are slobs and they were leaving bottles of urine and bags of trash and things like that just in the parking lot right next to where they had parked. And again, Walmart's got to pay somebody to go out and clean that mess up. And that's not their job. It shouldn't be anybody's duty. You should be cleaning up after yourselves. So that's another aspect where we as an industry really hampered ourselves.
Okay. So that was before the pandemic. So these things was frictional to stay in some of these areas overnight. So let me transition to this, Jonathan. I've really enjoyed everything that we've been talking about so far. So what's been the impact to the freight hauling industry? So let's talk about people outside of over the road haulers or truck drivers, like maybe people who are in charge of planning the loads or safety. So like, how do all of these people get impacted by kind of what's happened here in the year, I guess 2020 and extending into 2021, maybe 2022, but I mean, we don't think about these people, right? We think about the truck drivers, in which I think we insufficiently think and acknowledge the truck drivers, but we don't think about people who planning loads, safety, and things like that. So what are your thoughts on that?
I was hoping to actually talk to an individual in the safety department for the company that I used to drive for, but he was not available. But just knowing some of the things that I used to get to sit in on, some of the meetings and whatnot, these load planners are trying to take into account, hey, where is this driver going to possibly sleep tonight? We're sending him into, Brooklyn, New York, and, he's going to be leaving from, Wheatfield, Indiana, for example, maybe. And now that they've got to punch in, okay, well, the load delivers at this time, and he's going to be starting at this time, and it's this far, and all of a sudden you got to contend with, especially when you're getting over on the East Coast, parking is slim pickings already. Okay. That's pre-pandemic. Now with a
Wow.
pandemic and e-log mandate and things like that, that's got to be an absolute nightmare. And there's also a thing now where you can reserve spots, but that's even become a bit of a joke, which I'm sure we can get into that in a minute. But so for these load planners and safety directors and terminal managers and whatnot, it has created it's just a bigger headache for them, having to make sure, are we going to be able to get our guy into an area where he's going to have a place to stay and be safe? Are we going to be able to, maximize his or her earning potential this week because we're sticking him or her on this load, and there might not be a place to park for almost 200 miles until they get there, so they're going to have to shut down 4 or 5 hours early and then go finish out the rest of that load the next day, which then that's 4 or 5 hours off their clock the previous day and the next day. So at that point they're losing an entire day's driving.
That's crazy, right?
So
it just doesn't make sense. So like these rules were put in place because, right, the assumption or reality was that some truckers would just drive, and not sleep, and then fatigue would set in.
Yeah,
and that's something we talked about too. Is people might look from the outside at truckers and say, well, you're just behind the steering wheel, right? You're listening to the radio or podcast or whatever. It can't be that consuming of your mental energy or physical energy. But it's like, the reality is, you're needing to monitor and make decisions nonstop. It's this thing called, I interviewed for my book, The Velocity of Information, Linda Stone, the vice president of Microsoft. She said there's this thing called continuous partial attention, like that if you have to attend to multiple things, the toll that takes on your attention and then kind of your cognitive processes, which is exactly what a truck driver does, right? Because you have to always be monitoring not only what you're doing, but what everybody around you is doing in real time. And so it is this thing that brings on mental fatigue, brings on physical fatigue. So I don't think we give enough acknowledgement of that. It's like you don't jump out of the truck after 11 hours and be like, hey, like I'm all
exactly. Yeah, it's a very fatiguing job. And one, just for the brain processes that you're going through, you're making hundreds, if not 1,000 or more an hour. And it's just something people don't think about. And when you're having your brain operate at that level, it does get exhausting. Then there's other things that boil down to it. One, you're just sitting there and you're hitting every bump in the road. And there's a thing called micro bumps, or that's pretty much what most people accept them to be called, by micro bumps. But just those little bumps and whatnot, the way they jostle you in your lower back and things like that fatigues you. The way that you're dressed, if you're when I drove truck, when I was behind the wheel, if I knew I was going to be driving all day, I was in a pair of Crocs, a pair of gym shorts, and a t-shirt. And a lot of guys out there are probably, oh my God, you're wearing Crocs? I'm like, yeah. I'm going to say, because I felt the pedals best wearing Crocs. And you know what? If I'm going to be sitting there for 10, 11 hours, I want to kick them off. And you know what? I might be driving barefoot. Now, there are regulations against that.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes.
You can't drive barefoot, okay?
You can't drive barefoot. You can't drive in sandals. Pretty sure it's supposed to be a steel toe. They go pretty in depth. But you know what? At the end of the day, I was looking at it as, I'm going to be comfortable. And if I'm comfortable, that means I'm less fatigued. And if I'm less fatigued, the safer I am.
That is, I didn't know anything about the sandals, right?
Yeah.
Like that is crazy. So we have a question here, John, from Bull Rush, our good friend in Texas. By the way, Bull Rush.
Good evening.
So yeah, Lazarus Razors. You can also look up. Bull Rush is one of our regulars, a good guy. He has a question here. He's saying, how long does it take for a lumper to unload a truck?
Well, it depends on if you get one that's being paid by the hour or paid by the load. And there are two different types there. But if you're getting one paid by the load, they can have you unloaded in 30 minutes sometimes. Okay. And then there's others, you're going to be sitting there 4 or 5 hours. So
really, that seems like a long time to unload a truck, right?
yeah.
I mean, to me, it does. 4 to 5 hours. So yeah. So
That and during the pandemic, if you were out in 4 or 5 hours, that you were doing pretty well. From what I heard, there was a lot of guys, they were getting stuck at some of these places upwards of 10 hours because these places didn't typically have lumpers. So now they're getting lumpers into place that never been there, and they're trying to figure out everything and where to put stuff. And there was a whole fiasco there. And then once they get you unloaded, well, you've been sitting there for 10 hours, and technically that entire time that you're sitting there, you're supposed to be on duty. So now you have no time. They're like, get out of here. And you're like, I can't go anywhere. I'm stuck. And they're like, well, tough crap. You can't sleep here. So now you've got to violate your hours again.
Your ELD, right? You have to violate that. Okay.
To go find a place to sleep. Now, I was always a little bit smarter than the average bear. If I was going to be sitting anywhere that long, I would go and log into my sleeper. Because if I'm just sitting there, then what's it matter if I'm sitting in my driver's seat or if I'm sitting in my sleeper? And I actually did have this conversation with a DOT officer the one time, because he's like, what were you doing here? I was getting unloaded. He's like, oh, well, that's a violation. You're supposed to be on duty. I was like, but I wasn't there. I was in my sleeper, sir. I was like, if I'm in my sleeper, I've got to log that I'm in my sleeper, correct? He's like, yeah. I was like, well, that's where I was. I was like, which is sleeper berth time. I was like, I can't log on duty sleeper berth. There's no such thing. And he looked a little perplexed. And I was like, so which one do you want me to do? Because I was logging where I was. And so he decided, not, I guess, if you want to say that he's being nice or something, he decided not to hit me with a fine or anything there. But it gets a little hairy. And like I said, during that pandemic time, especially right after all this started, and places were letting no drivers in, and they were getting lumpers for the first time. I heard multiple stories about guys getting stuck at places 10, 11, 12 hours.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So during that time, you're not getting compensated. Would that be correct? So
you're supposed to be able to get detention time after 2 hours. But the problem is that is supposed to only be if they haven't started on you yet. Once they're unloading you, once they're unloading you, you're not supposed to get the detention time. It's kind of goofy with the way it works, and it can be different from company to company and things like that.
Okay.
But and it depends on what your company has in place with that customer, and it's tough. But technically, you can sit there for 2 hours and you're not going to get anything. Now, once it clicks over that 2 hour mark, you can start hitting them for detention time. But once they start unloading you, your detention time is supposed to stop. So now if they took 10 hours to unload you after you sat there for 2 hours, and like there's plenty of times where you've sat for 2 hours and they're like, oh, got to start unloading this guy. So now you sat there for 2 hours. You never got detention time, which detention time does not pay the bills. For a lot of company drivers, you're talking, you might get paid $15 an hour for detention time. And a lot of people think, oh, $15 an hour just to sit around. Yeah, that's great. But when I can be going down the road making $30, $40 an hour, big difference.
Man, that's insightful. I didn't know that at all. So how about people who are preparing the loads, like safety managers or anything like that? Like, how do you think 2020 impacted them?
Well, I mean, one, there was like I said, for me, I drove flatbed. So just thinking back to the company that I worked for, construction materials, things like that, all those things got put by the wayside. So I know that freight went way down for flatbed companies. Likewise, if you had dry van, freight was way up because people were, hey, wherever we can get, toilet paper or this or that, especially if you're going and pulling out of the ports and whatnot. A lot of that stuff became a big factor. And there were companies that were going out and they're like, well, we're typically, a flatbed company, but they might have went out and bought van trailers just because that's where the freight was. So now you've got load planners and driver managers and whatnot planning out trips for what is an industry that they really don't have a idea for. If they were a flatbed company before, they're going and maybe dipping their toes into the water of hauling food. Well, now you got to figure out where are you going to be getting this stuff from? Are you going to be trying to create accounts, which I have no idea how that would work out in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
Are you going off of the load boards and things like that, which, they're taking a lot of times 10 or 15% of the load right off the top, which if you're a big company, that might hurt you a little bit. That might not. Depends on how you want to go about everything. So, it really goofed everything up because, if the stuff that you typically haul was deemed, well, in this sense, non-essential, but you're still an essential worker, as the government likes to label you, then it was either you're floundering because you had nothing to haul and you got to figure out a new way to make money, or you adapted and you went out and you bought a new trailer to just hopefully pay the bills.
Man, that is crazy. That is crazy. So, Jonathan, let me ask you this. So, back in March of 2020, so everybody woke up in the morning, right? And we'd either been deemed essential or non-essential. Like that had just happened, which is something weird. Like, we don't hear a lot about that today. And I think it's something that's going to be with us forever. Like we'll make the career decisions and all this, and even, kind of use some umbrage, based upon, hey, I was essential or non-essential. But so, truck drivers got deemed essential, but in my opinion, right, like I believe they were greatly underappreciated by government and Americans during the pandemic. Actually, I'm running for political office in my city. And one of the things we have an interstate which abuts our city is, I want to say we need to be more, or not more, but we need to have an informed approach of how we can support our over-the-road haulers that interface with our communities. Like I'm completely on board with that. But so anyway, we had parades for nurses and doctors and other, healthcare workers in my city too. They'd bring out the $1 million ladder truck and they'd have it out and people would come to work, and I'd be like, it's incomplete, right? I mean, I get it with the nurses and doctors. I kind of get it, but like we have drivers, we have truck drivers, right? Who they just said, here, you can drive more hours, you can carry more freight and whatever. But people are coming into town. They're not getting parades. Not that you have to get a parade, but right, you're not getting a parade. You're not getting increased times to unload. You're not getting the state, hey, like if you park over here, that's okay. Like, don't worry about it right now. You're not getting that. You're not getting hazard pay for over the road drivers. This was just insane to me. Like, at a moment when over the road drivers they're already critical, right, to society. But now there's an emphasis on over-the-road drivers bringing in our food and our medical supplies. So we're going to relax these restrictions, but we're not going to do anything to support the over-the-road drivers. That was so tone-deaf to me. And it angers me to this day. It's completely despicable, I think, at a federal government level, at a state government. One of the things I want to mention is the state of Arizona. So I did some research on this, and I'm like, what did states do to support over-the-road drivers? And Arizona opened up 2 truck stops that have been closed, have been shuttered. And they said, truckers, come here. We're going to give you, we're going to keep the restrooms open. We're going to do food. We're going to do some, basic necessity supplies for a few hours a day. So I'm like, well, at least Arizona did something at 2 waysides, which have been closed. Nobody else did that I could find. So I guess what I want to ask you right now is, what is your thought, or what is your perception on how truckers were treated during the pandemic, especially during spring of 2020, when we're holding parades for nurses going to work, teachers going to work, but the truck driver coming in town with essential supplies, everybody's like, yeah, that's just their job. I mean, to me, it really is raw. It really is appalling. But I want to get your take on that.
Well, honestly, I truly believe just with the way truck drivers are treated in general, should really be appalling to anybody that wants to look into it. I can recall driving into one town up in New York. I don't remember the name of the town or anything, but when I looked at my local directions, it said, do not turn on to any other streets except the one that you're supposed to turn on, because you will immediately get pulled over and get a ticket. And as soon as you enter the city limits, sure enough, all of a sudden there's a car that appears behind you, and it's local police department. And whenever a truck enters their city limits, all of a sudden they're tailing them. And if you make a wrong turn, they're gonna nail you. Multiple drivers I talked to going to this customer that ended up, turning like a street too early or something. And there would be times where you turn on the right street and they still pull you over. What are you doing? I'm like, I got a delivery right down here. And, there's another aspect of, truckers can't idle their truck for longer than 5 minutes.
No kidding. Yeah, right. Yeah. Tell us about that.
And I realize this might be a little bit of a long detour to get to your question about how drivers were treated during the pandemic, but I think it's important to point out how drivers are treated even pre-pandemic. And so by federal law, you can't idle a diesel powered vehicle, I think over 10,000 pounds, if I remember correctly, something like that, for longer than 5 minutes. So there's all sorts of laws going into place all over the country where if you got an animal in your car, you better have that car turned on with the air conditioner going, because somebody's gonna otherwise come over, break your window out, and rescue your dog. And I'm not saying that that's acceptable or anything, but the idea that a dog is treated with more forethought than a truck driver, because at the end of the day, especially now, you're having to sit in the truck. You're not getting out. You're not going into an air conditioned warehouse, which not all of them are air conditioned or anything. But you're still not going into a warehouse or anything. You're having to sit in the truck. And if it's, let's say you're in Miami in August, well, great. You're looking at 110 degrees with 100% humidity, and you get to be told to sit there with no air conditioner and let's have the windows down or something, I guess, because that's going to make a big difference. It's awful. And likewise, you can come up to Pennsylvania where I am right now, and temperatures just the other day were -6, -7.
Holy smokes! Okay,
and you're supposed to sit there without any heat. And they say, oh, well, you got a bunk heater. Well, that bunk heater does not warm the entire cab of the truck. The bunk heater is called a bunk heater for a reason, because it just really meant to warm the cab. Likewise, the bunk heater can double as a cooling unit and be an air conditioner. But again, air conditioners only cool off the outside ambient air. So if it's 100 degrees out, well, if that's not getting any way to charge or anything, it's only cooling so much. And again, it's only really meant to cool your bunk, not the entire cab of your vehicle.
And so Jonathan, isn't it where California too is also saying that truckers have to have like electric?
It wouldn't surprise me at all.
They can't use like generators to do the cab cooling. It has to
and that's probably talking about APUs, which are loud and noisy. And honestly, I think a lot of companies are getting away from those because they take a lot of maintenance. And they're finding that they're just not worth it with some of the other offerings today. Like the bunk heater that I actually had when I drove, federal law actually gave us a 400-pound weight allowance, so I could actually weigh 80,400 pounds with that unit on my truck rather than just weighing 80,000, which was pretty nice. But you also had to have this special little card when you got pulled over by DOT, because if you weighed 80,400, guaranteed they're going to pull you in. But then you get to give that to them and be like, "Oh, no, I'm allowed. I got this on my truck." And they go, "Oh, okay, see you later." But so, yeah, now moving on to the pandemic,
Right.
You still got a lot of issues where drivers are mistreated. People take for granted the sacrifices drivers make, being gone for weeks at a time away from their family, their children, their friends, pets, any semblance of home. Then we were sitting there saying, hey, so New York City still needs stuff, Los Angeles still needs stuff, Chicago still needs stuff.
Absolutely. Right.
All these hotbed areas still need stuff. And then we're going to make you go and sit in these areas, and you're not allowed to get out of your truck. But by the way, these are like the worst areas you could ever go. So you're going to have to sit there, and you're going to have, the windows down or something, if you want to stay cool or hot, whatever it is out at the time. And, then you're going to get going down the road, and what are you going to do? You're going to fire up your air conditioner or your heat, and you're going to recycle the air. So now if you did happen to catch anything, passing through the air or anything like that, or, somebody brought you your bills, or, the guy that last touched your bills, maybe he was positive and just doesn't even know it yet. So now you go and you touch them, and you're touching your steering wheel, and you touch all the knobs, and next thing you know, again, you cycle on the air. Now it's blowing all over your cabin, and just terrible things. I mean, truck drivers were treated like a petri dish.
No, absolutely. And I think this is the point to underscore right now, right? And be like, this is insane. We get to this point of, especially March 2020, but, ongoing from that. And yeah, I mean, all these things coming out from the government of different decrees, and $300 a week or $600 a week, I don't know, extra unemployment, right?
Yep.
There wasn't hazard pay for over the road truck drivers.
Yeah.
And that to me is appalling. And had that been put out there, I don't think really anybody would have been like, oh yeah, that's just crazy to do this over the road truck driver, like this bonus. I think people have been like, yes, like they deserve it. Like this is well warranted. And so yeah, I mean, you brought that up, and I'm looking at this and saying, yeah, this how in the world, I'm still stunned at the fact of, in a forensic ability to go back and to analyze, spring of 2020, how truck drivers are basically we offloaded all of our responsibility onto them as a society. Yes. And we just said, just do this. and I'm like, how in the world? I mean, it's just shameful to me. I'm beyond appalled by it, because I have much respect for truck drivers, and then also when we needed them, I guess, I don't know if it's the most, but I mean, it was portrayed as the most. Nothing was being done, right? We had Arizona, who opened up 2 waysides, which had been abandoned, and said, you can come here and you can stay here, and we'll open up the bathrooms and whatever for 5 hours a day. And that's it. And I'm like, where in the world are, government coming in with National Guard resources, or states, and saying, here are waysides, truckers, come in. We're going to provide you a hot meal, a shower, clean restrooms, food, some basic medical, and some other things. Like, we are going to do that. Absolutely. And none of it was there. And John, so this it just keeps hitting me on both sides of my brain of like, how was this allowed to happen? And I don't know. I'm really sickened by it. So that's one of the reasons why, like I said, today isn't the end of this. Like I'm running for city council. We have a major interstate that runs through our community, and I'm like, this is just not acceptable. This is not acceptable at any level to me. And so I guess, there's my frustration, and, you've done an exceptional job of explaining, the details, and helping inform the audience about this.
So
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. One of the things that I remember happening was, oh, we need to have special shopping hours for elderly because they're at high risk, things like that. So if we open up the store early for these individuals so they can, an hour or two before everybody else gets in there and gets their COVID germs on everything, then we can, make it a little bit safer for them. Well, why wasn't that ever an offer for truck drivers? Hey, we're going to open up the store at this time. If you drive truck, show up with it or something like that. You show your CDL at the door,
right?
And you're coming in and you're getting the amenities that you need.
No, absolutely. Because right, it would be these things like, at the start of school year. I remember if we go to like some fast food restaurants, like if you can show that you're a teacher, like you'll get a free value menu and stuff. I'm like, how in the world, right? I mean, Jonathan, right? I mean, if you show an identification and say, like, I'm an over the road hauler, right, that you wouldn't receive these things. And not only that, I think that's the bare minimum. I mean, I think that is the bare minimum. I think not only that, but I would go as far as saying, like, tax credits and things like this. And I'm going to get into this in a little bit. I'm working through our outline and we're kind of toward the end, but I'm just like, how... And for truck drivers to keep doing this as society basically turned their back and said, you're the essential employees that we offloaded all of our risk onto, just do your job, I think is appalling. It's just sickening to me. So I'm like, just thank you, truck drivers, thank you so much for just not saying, hey, like society doesn't appreciate us, like we're going to fold. They didn't do that. Like they just continued to do their job. And I'm on a few levels. One is I'm absolutely appalled by that in March of 2020, the federal, government, the DOT didn't come out and have these things saying, we are going to put in place waysides, which we will maintain specifically for over-the-road drivers. And we will have, of course, bathrooms. We'll have a laundry facility. Like we'll have these things available at these waysides. And then, the communities wouldn't also, respond to this and say, we are going to do you did parades for nurses, like every day, nurses and doctors, like we're not going to do an essential workers, truck drivers parade, like they should have done that. I believe it should have been done. And so I'm looking at all of this and again, like it just really it frustrates me because I'm looking at this and saying, one, it's wrong from a political standpoint, and also organically that communities didn't rally around this. I mean, how many videos did we have on TV in March and April of 2020 of here's this local, community club and they're knitting masks or they're making masks for people. Like, okay, I get it. But like they weren't doing anything for truckers, right? Like truckers coming into the community, they weren't assembling, like, here's a hot meal for truckers, like, here's whatever. Like, none of that was that. I never saw one article about that.
No, never.
And I'm like, so I'm going to shift us right now. So let's talk about this. So let's say if we have this magic time machine, and it's probably made in Pennsylvania because they make all the really cool stuff. But
that's right.
I'm assuming this is made in Pennsylvania and not in Wisconsin because it's too damn cold here to make anything right now. It's like minus 18 degrees and just getting cooler. But let's say we have this time machine, Jonathan. So you and I go back and we're meeting with this group of people, like federal and state government and stuff and whatever. And they're saying, okay, Jonathan and David, and David is really the minor player in this negotiation, by the way, but they're saying, Jonathan, David, what do you think would be some things we could do for over-the-road truck drivers during the spring of 2020 to, one, like support them in like the actual, what their needs would be, morale and these things. What should we do for over-the-road truck drivers? Because we are going to announce that they're going to drive longer, they're going to carry heavier loads, they're going to do this thing, they're not going to get the lumper pay. What can be some ways that we support over-the-road truck drivers? I mean, and they're like, okay, Jonathan, it's your turn. Like, what would you say to that?
One of the first things I would recommend would be reinstating per diem pay. Now, under Trump, one of the things that he did when he did his big tax revisions and whatnot was he eliminated per diem pay for company drivers. And that was actually a pretty big deal because that was about $60 a day that a driver could write off on his taxes at the end of the year. I think I was writing off federally because the state taxes usually required a bunch of receipts, but federally, every day that you were on the road, you could write off $60 a day. So there's guys that would write off an easy 18 grand just in per diem pay. Now, at the height of this pandemic, I think that would have been a great thing, would have been reinstating the per diem pay, whether it was just allowing these guys to, again, write it off on their taxes, or saying, hey, you know what, we're going to cough up X amount of dollars, and however that worked out, I'd have to do a little bit more thinking on it, because on one hand, I'm like, oh, the government was giving out $600 a month or a week, whatever it was, to people on unemployment. Right. Why couldn't they do that for truck drivers? Because at the end of the day, again, you're away from home. You don't have the convenience to just drop it into Walmart all the time, because again, a lot of these shopping centers are being set up where you can't just get a semi into them. You've got to be delivering there and have somebody tell you, yes, you're going to bring this truck in this way and only this way, or else we're going to have a lot of issues. So it's not just a matter of being able to whip into a Walmart or anything like that anymore. So, sometimes your shopping was being done at the truck stop or something, but if they're not letting you in, that created another issue. So, just some per diem pay, getting that back in order. As far as
So tell me, what is per diem pay? Like, exactly, so everybody understands it. Per diem pay.
So per diem pay, all that was essentially compensation for truck drivers, really anybody, if you're working away from home, where you would be, some companies would actually pay their drivers per diem pay, which depending on who you worked for, some guys really liked that their company would do that, because that's just extra pay in their paycheck, and other drivers didn't want that because they were gonna actually lose money, because there's companies that would be like, oh, we'll give you $40 each day. Well, $40 times 5 days a week or something, that's $200 extra in your paycheck. But if I could write off $60 a day because you're not giving me anything at the end of the year, well, that's $300 a week in my paycheck, or in a sense, because you're not actually getting that money at that point. So some companies would actually pay you money, other ones they wouldn't, and then you just write it off on your taxes at the end of the year. But like I said, when Trump did his tax stuff, he actually took away the per diem pay for company drivers.
That sucks. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, on your taxes, that is, which then I think that kind of forced a lot of companies to actually start paying per diem pay. So it was what it was. But I think that would have, like I said, definitely been something that would have been a huge benefit to drivers, because you're already stretching your resources while you're out there. The second that you have to go through a pandemic like this, it just exacerbates the issues.
We have a question here from Phil Henry, Jonathan, our friend in Germany, by the way, Phil Henry.
Howdy, Phil.
So he's saying, is there any official countermeasure against the toll on the health it takes? From my experience, working is very, very straining on the body, especially the heart. So I guess is he saying, like, how do you countermeasure the toll it takes on your health? I kind of get what he's saying, but yeah.
I think with what he's asking, the only real countermeasure is just exercise for a truck driver. Once you get into this industry, it's a very sedentary lifestyle. You end up putting on a lot of weight, things like that, which there for a long time I didn't put on weight. I was actually doing really well. Then a couple injuries later, and I became lethargic, and I put on a lot. So yeah, the big thing is just exercise, making sure that you're getting out of the truck, being active. I think it was something like 52 laps around truck with a 48-foot trailer
Okay.
would be equivalent to 1 mile.
Wow, I didn't know that. All right,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
So, but at the same time, let's say you just put in a 14-hour day. Now you get to run into the truck stop wherever you are. Hopefully, grab a shower and a bite to eat, stuff like that. And then you gotta call the family and make sure everybody's alive and doing well. Make sure do the kids need help with math homework, et cetera, et cetera. And then you look at your watch and go, oh man, I've got to get in a 10-hour break still and be up and rolling at this time. The last thing that you want to do is try and walk 52 laps around your truck.
Right.
But it really is a necessary evil. Just trying to make sure that you're staying active.
Oh my God. Yeah. What movie was Sylvester Stallone in where he was pulling down? He was an arm wrestler. Remember, he was like lifting weights and stuff while he was truck driving. Do you know that one? Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about. I can't think of what it was called. I saw it once when I was a kid.
This is where the our friends in the chat need to help us. I don't know the movie, but it was yes. And then Kenny Rogers was in the one too, where I think he was a truck driver and a race driver. So I forget what that movie was, but Salzu's surfer is not helping us out tonight. So buddy, you have to take care of yourself. It's personal care.
Yeah,
we appreciate you being here, but yeah. So I want to ask this question. So let's say, so I shopped last week at our Menards. So are you familiar with that? What a Menards
love
is?
Menards.
Okay.
I hated delivering there. If I was going to Menards, I knew I was getting stuck there 2 to 3 hours minimum to get unloaded. But I don't have any that are around me. So when I got to go to those, I would park the truck because they would do everything. You don't have to worry about doing the dunnage for the drywall or anything like that, because that's what I always deliver there was drywall. So I would go where they told me to park. I would untarp my load, and then I'd just go inside and I would just go around picking up some amenities. Maybe I went and got a summer sausage and a couple other things, and about 2 hours later, I go back out and they'd be about 3/4 of the way done and be like, yeah, that's about right.
Wow. So when I was in college, I worked at Menards, which I thought was the best job ever because one, they always had a lot of staff per shift, and then they sent you things every like 3-4 months, like a beach towel, which I think I still have to this day, like Menards beach towel. Save big money at Menards, and they filmed a lot of the commercials, John. So this is not well known to the people in the audience, but they filmed a lot of the Menards commercials in the 1990s in the store where I worked.
Oh,
so the guy that would come in, with the white hair, and he'd do this stuff, like I was in the plumbing department. We'd be told to like set up this certain like display this way. And then at the end of the day, this guy would come in and they'd have the camera crew and he'd film it. So I don't know if it's that big of a deal, but by God, back then it was like, I really thought that was cool. So let's take this and let's say there would have been an initiative. So I wrote the book, The Velocity of Information, The Velocity of Information, Human Thinking During Chaotic Times, which releases on April 11th, 2022. By the way, you can find it on Amazon and places that sell books. It's an awesome book. Like I'm honestly amazed that it wasn't censored, that the book wasn't banned. So my publisher stood with me. So thank you very much for that. But
good on them.
But yeah, I'm like, I don't know. It's going to be, a year from now, like this wouldn't be published. But so it's an awesome book. But one of the things that I want to, we talked about essential, non-essential things like that. But let's say I'm going back into history. During the start of World War II, there was this thing called the Committee for National Morale in the United States, and they were talking about how to boost, morale for civilians and for workers and so forth. But I want to kind of take a branch off of that and say, let's say there would have been this campaign started in March of 2021 by the U.S. federal government, right? And they said, we're going to have, and I'm just naming this, right? And this is a lousy name for this. I understand this. Like people will say, like, here's a better name for this. And it's great. Like, I'll take that. But so let's say that we have this thing called the Brown Bag Boost for over-the-road heroes. Okay, so there's this campaign, and it comes out on TV, right, in emails and things like that into communities, and said, hey, we have this campaign. It's March of 2020 called the Brown Bag Boost for over-the-road heroes. And we're going to provide you with brown paper bags. And in those bags, we want you to put things which would support over-the-road haulers. So we're doing this to, one, meet their needs to some extent, and one to show moral support. So I'm just going to take it and say, if they were to ask you, Jonathan, if they're saying, what should be in this bag? So we have this one bag. What should be in this bag? Community members, churches, civic groups, the Lions, the JCs, the Rotary, kids at school, everything that goes in this bag. And then it's like, okay, so a trucker comes into town, or they're at a wayside outside of town, and they get handed one of these bags. What would, as an over-the-road hauler, what would be meaningful and useful to be in that bag?
Honestly, man, it probably would surprise a lot of people, but it's just a thank you card, because it is a thankless industry, and it seemed like when I was driving, it seemed more and more like we were just being targeted. And at the end of the day, it's amazing how many people, you just hear truck drivers getting their names cussed all the time, and it's awful. And you're like, hey, that BMW you're driving, guess how it got to where you bought it? Or, the drywall in your home, or, the groceries on your table. So at the end of the day, probably the smallest thing would just be a thank you card, letting guys know, hey, we might not have been able to do much, but you are appreciated. Short of that, man, it's so tough to say. Maybe a little bit of fresh fruit. That probably a good little one. That's something that can be kept in the truck and easily on hand. You don't have to worry about it being kept cold and things like that.
Right.
I hate to focus back on money or anything. I was going to say something like, maybe a gift card to, McDonald's or something, because, at the time, well, I shouldn't say at the time, but, there's plenty of McDonald's and Burger Kings and things like that in truck stops. But, if we're going back to early 2020, well, guess what? You couldn't get in the truck stops to go to those places. So at that point, that wouldn't be a benefit at all.
Right.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, I really think, just a thank you card, let, these men and women know that you're thinking of them. And, if you were able to, maybe throw in a little meatball sandwich, or, a cold cut sandwich or something. When these guys were having to go through that stuff, it's not like guys were starving, but finding food was tough. There were guys that would never pack a lunch. They were eating out every day, and then all of a sudden they had to, I've got to go buy a cooler and keep ice in the truck, and it's a lifestyle change that happened very abruptly, and nobody was ready for.
So that's cool. So let's think this out a little more. So let's say like there is this there's this bag, right? Hypothetically, like this brown paper bag. And I'm just saying that kind of for simplicity, because a lot of people just know what that looks like at a grocery store, right? So, and there's either a national or a state campaign of saying, we want to have these things available for truckers. So I think what you said is right on. And I had made a note, put this in my notes of saying, I think a thank you card, right? Because we have students all the time, or just people or civic organizations write thank you cards. And I think, right, like someone actually writing something that's authentic, and you're reading it and it's in print, and you're like, well, this is cool. And then what might be other things? Is it like a Gatorade bottle, is it a sandwich, or is it like a speed stick, or is it, I'm not trying to be be, to dismiss this at all. I'm just authentically.
No, you're fine.
Or is it an MP? Is it a thumb drive, and it has an MP3 of like free audiobooks on it, right? Because a number of audiobooks are in the public domain. Is it something like that? Because saying, hey, you're driving in. I don't know. I'm just trying to think what could be. I mean, this is like a bare minimum of saying, again, what did I call it? It's the brown bag boost for Over the Road Heroes campaign. But I'm thinking, if you, again, you're opening that bag, what would be things as an over the road driver that you'd be like, oh, this is helpful? I mean, is it something like, wet wipes? Is it something like, again, a thumb drive with, here are, 20 books on this thumb drive? Or
I guess because when I originally answered that, I was thinking of it as, a lot of drivers you talk to, they don't want any help. They don't want, quote unquote handouts or anything like that. So, it gets into a kind of a tough area where you're trying to guess that. But, if it was for myself and, hey, either way, I'm getting this brown bag and I'm not going to have a say, just what am I hoping to find in it at that point? An extra deodorant or something because, who knows when the next time that trucker might be able to swing in somewhere. You know what? Package of socks would go a long way because at the end of the day, we're using our feet for everything at that point. Our livelihood depends on our feet. We're hitting the go pedal, we're hitting the brake pedal, clutch, and whatnot. Wet wipes are always a nice thing. A towel. I can't tell you how many times when I drove truck as a flatbedder, you get caught out in the elements or something, and next thing you know, you're soaked. And just a good towel to dry off was always nice. Which I always kept those, but for a flatbed driver, or, even if you're a van driver, sometimes you got to jump out of the truck in pouring down rain and go open those doors still. And you got a 60-foot sprint from your driver's door to the tail of the trailer to open those doors. Well, guess what? If it's pouring down rain, you're going to get wet. So like I said, package of socks, a good towel, cheap deodorants, probably something that a lot of drivers should probably keep in their truck already is just peanut butter.
Peanut butter, okay.
Because at the end of the day, you know what? You can find a loaf of bread somewhere and you can have a peanut butter sandwich no matter how hungry you are.
That's amazing. So, okay. So Jonathan, you and I right now, we've got this bag, all right? And, all right, I actually got a few of them here. I've got 12 of them right here. So, it's 12 pack of these bags. So people are like, oh my God, Doc, you got a prop. I'm like, I do. So I have this bag and I can fill it up to the top. And so, okay, we said peanut butter, wet wipes, like a thank you or appreciation card, which I think is awesome. Like, absolutely. Like, schools or civic organizations, right on. Right. And would you think like a mask? Because remember, like people were like, making these masks out of like, hey, I'm making a mask out of my bed sheets, or like just de-skin my couch. And now it's like 45 masks. Or what do you think would go in this bag? Like, how could we stuff this bag?
Would you really want a mask though? Because
I wouldn't personally.
You're spending all your time alone. You're not getting to go in anywhere. You're not getting to socialize with anybody. Do you want a reminder that's what's making your hardship even worse? And because at that point, you're not going to be wearing it while you're in the truck alone,
unless you're stealing the truck, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Take this job and shove it. I'm taking the truck with me.
Right.
So, anything else? Like I said, so some fruit.
Okay.
We go, random banana or an orange, an apple,
absolutely, right.
Things like that.
How about my idea of the thumb drive? Was I totally off on that? Was that?
I'm sure for some guys that have that. No, I'm sure for some guys that'd be great. Plastic silverware. One thing I did when I drove truck, I would keep cans of chunky soup above the compartment above my driver's seat. And whenever I would see somebody out along the interstate on an off ramp or something that had a sign that said, hungry, we'll do whatever for food, I would grab a can of Campbell's chunky soup. And whenever I would hit a truck stop that had a Wendy's, Wendy's just has all their spoons there, for the taking. So I go in, order something from Wendy's, and then I grab a handful of spoons, and then, they're individually wrapped and everything. So I'd tape a spoon to a can of Campbell's chunky soup, and if I saw somebody out on the edge of the roadway like that, I would just say, "Here you go."
That's really cool. Like, thank you for doing that. Yeah, that's really
but
cool.
Harkening back to this paper bag thing, just some plastic silverware. There's times where you end up wanting to cause I think most truck drivers probably keep some canned goods in their truck, just for that time that you get into a pickle and you want to have something. Which Campbell's chunky soup, it's not terrible cold, it's not the greatest, but you know what? At the end of the night, when you just need something in your stomach, it does just fine. So, but if you don't have that spoon or something, because for whatever reason now you're like, oh crap, now you're trying to drink it out of the can, and
Right.
So some plastic silverware or something, just a couple little prepackaged things, those would go a long way.
Okay. That's really cool.
Toilet paper.
So toilet paper, some chunky soup, plastic silverware, socks. So
Yep.
I mean, these are things, and I really want to bring attention to this, and not to be like, this is wishful thinking or that. These are actual, authentic campaigns, which we've done in the past during World War II, World War I, under President Wilson and things like that. But we didn't do that, and the fact that the feds maybe didn't do it, which they didn't. States like Arizona's like, okay, we'll open up 2 rest side areas for 5 hours a day and things like that. But I'm like, this is genuine. Like, this should have happened. And honestly, I don't know who would dispute this, but I don't care if they would. This should have happened. Like, what I saw, Jonathan, at the start of the pandemic, right? The media was tuned into all of these celebrities saying, hey, we're all in this together. And by the way, like, here's how to sanitize your phone. Like, that was crazy. Like, we saw celebrities saying, like, here's a little mixture of like bleach and water to sanitize your phone and stuff.
Yep.
Like, that stuff is all meaningless, right? Like, let's talk about things that are meaningful, including and maybe centered on our over the road haulers. And here's something we could do. It's like, right, we could set up these. I mean, I don't even know what this kind of looks like, but I see it as a very minimum of states. You keep X number of waysides open, and at those waysides, and you're bringing in, that you have hot meals. And I see this thing, right, like after tornadoes come through and hurricanes and wildfires, like Tide brings in these trucks where they can do people's laundry. I'm like, put them here, for the truckers. And then as we've talked about, like, there should have been this campaign. I'm really adamant about this. This really bothers me. There should have been this campaign where, at the very least, right, it's the paper bag, the brown bags for over the road heroes. And, you open up and there's a card there, and plus, like, some food, maybe some socks, some wet wipes, some, like a MP3, or, just this variety of things. But it's kind of like this recognition, or at least you come into a truck stop or you come into a wayside, and you do have the ability to have your clothes laundered, a clean restroom, some food, maybe some basic medical or whatever, because, like, this is a time of an emergency, a national emergency. And also this fact that police are still, saying, oh, you parked here and you shouldn't have parked here, so here's a ticket. Like, that's crazy. Like, there should have been, every governor should have said, knock that off. Like, do not issue that citation. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, honestly, like, as a governor, or even in my local, the city where I'm running for city council, like, I would have said, there's no way I support this. There's absolutely no way right now I support this. So these are the things I want to, and I appreciate so much, everything you've talked about tonight, because I don't think people have perspective of, first of all, truck driving was an industry that had many obstacles presented to it, right? There were never enough spaces to park overnight and things like this. But the moment that we went kind of offline and said this whole essential, non-essential, how things really went negative for truck drivers, and truck drivers just did what they did. They did their job. And so so I thank you so much for bringing that knowledge forth. And again, for those of you watching the show and that know me, like Vanessa and Bolo and things like that, like this really has me worked up, because I'm just like, how in the world, for example, in my community, the fire department would bring out the $1 million aerial truck, the ladder truck, and the pumpers and all this, and they would set up, and they'd have the parade for the nurses and the doctors, which I kind of get. Like, I kind of get that. But at the same time, I'm like, how in the world did we not have something comparable? We live on the interstate. The interstate goes right by our city. How do we not a couple times at least have something that we acknowledge? Or there's a rest area, a significant rest area, literally 2.5 miles from my house, right off the interstate. How did we not have the Lions Club, the JCs, or something from a state or national or organic local level, just take that over and say, over the road haulers, like, just stop through here. At least we'll have the brown bag. Like, I'm sorry we can't do more for you, but at least we can do this. And so I'm looking at this and I'm trying to bring awareness to this. It's saying, I love over the road drivers. I know they're not perfect. None of us are perfect, but the way that they have been treated since spring of 2020 to present is crazy.
Yeah, and the present is still a big issue for a lot of drivers, because there's still a lot of issues with getting showers, getting places to do laundry. Now, I'm not sure if for guys that are out 3, 4, 5+ weeks at a time, laundry is a big issue. But for a lot of drivers, most drivers are only out a week or two now, at least in my experience of everybody that I know and talk to and whatnot. So laundry is not as big of an issue, but there's still a huge issue with parking, because you can go in reserve spots now and you'll pay $20. But the problem is, guys are just like, I need somewhere to park, and there's an empty spot, and they're just parking the reserved parking spots. So then you get somewhere where you're expecting to be able to park, and then the truck stop's not kicking these people out of the reserve spots, and they're claiming it's because there's liability if we kick them out while they're on break and whatnot, yada yada yada. So now you're still sitting there with your hands tied because you pay $20 for a spot, which, I mean, they'll give you $20 back, but you paid $20 2 days ago expecting to have parking when you got to this place, and now you don't. Another issue, again, showers, because like so many other places around the country, so many other industries, these truck stops are having trouble finding people who want to work because, for whatever reason, people don't want to work now. And so talking to a couple of my buddies, they're saying, if you're not at the truck stop by like 5 p.m. to try and grab a shower, you're not getting one that night, because they don't have anybody to clean the showers after 5 p.m. Likewise with food, if it's a truck stop that has their own kitchen, things like that, where like some of the pilots and Flying J's might make their own pizzas and things like that, they're shutting down the kitchens 4 or 5 p.m. because they've got nobody to work the kitchen. So there's still a really big issue happening here right now. And this silence brought to you by... did we lose him? We might have lost him. Oh, no. Let's say stuff's got clicked around on the screen. Still there, David?
you're still there, buddy?
Oh, there we go.
Okay, yeah. All right, so it's on my end. Yeah, here at the North Star Recording Studio. You know, once it gets cold, I have to dethaw things and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So this all makes sense. And another thing, so I'm thinking about, like, in my community, right? Like, in most communities, or at least counties, have a county fair. Like, they have fairgrounds. They have places where they could stage, for example, truck drivers. Again, we're putting a context of this. This is an emergency. This is a federal emergency which has been declared. And again, I'm thinking, I live in my county seat. That's where my city is. We have a fairgrounds which easily could have accommodated, several, truck drivers and rigs, and then also had, various buildings there that had bathrooms, that would have had food and accessibility and things like that. I'm like, that was never contemplated, right? It was never even an idea. And so I don't know if I'm angry about it. I was angry about it. Like, I'm past that. I'm just kind of looking at the logistics of why was this overlooked? And I guess I'm not trying to answer that. I'm just saying we need to be better in the future, as you've indicated. I think had we done this, had we stepped up to the plate and said, like, this brown bag boost for over the road heroes, opening up, like, our county fairgrounds temporarily, because otherwise, what is the alternative, right? Truck driver there isn't ample parking before the year 2020, so they're having to double park somewhere, or park somewhere there can't be truck drivers park. So they open up their, in the morning, they're like, hey, a $200 fine. This is horrible. So let me get into this. So there's some changes that have just been proposed, or things that are happening right now. So one is a CDL license, commercial driver's license. Next month, starting February 7th, you have to take a course in order to get your CDL license. So there's more coursework involved with this. And I talked to somebody today who is completing their CDL license and said, yeah, I'm doing this in Wisconsin, right? Because if I waited a month, if I waited beyond February 7th, this would cost me an extra $5,000 to take this course. So one is, I guess, what is your thought on, do you think it's, I guess, what's your response to drivers having to take this additional CDL training? Is it good, or is it, like, in the whole context of the situation, is like, this is insane? Like,
I wish I knew what it was. It's really hard telling.
Okay.
Because like, when I went to truck driving school, you had 2 weeks of classroom work, and they did 4 weeks of actually running around in the truck, things like that. And then you went to your DMV, and they had a tester at the DMV who jumped in the truck with you, and they went out and you drove a road course that they told you to drive. And it's not like you knew the road course or anything beforehand. I mean, you did, because the trainers at the school have enough people going through the program. Okay. At each DMV, they have their set loop that you're going to run. So depending on which one you went to, the trainer knew, all right, this is what we're going to end up running. This is how it's going to be. But when you get into when that tester gets in the truck with you, they're going to say, okay, we're going to go out here. We're going to hang a right at this light. And then as you're getting up to the next light or something, he's like, okay, you're going to want to get in the left lane. We're going to make a left here onto 80, and we're going to do this and that. And, it's not big heads up or anything. So as far as what the new requirement is, I can't say for sure, because, like, truck driving school for me was just over $5,000. Now, a lot of these companies are going to reimburse drivers, but then you can also, if you get with a company that's going to pay for your truck driving school, you may or may not end up with a company that is good. Some companies that will do that are actually very good. Other ones are going to lock you into a contract, and it's going to be a rough go for a year or two while you're working off that payment. So, it's going to be hard telling. Likewise, I have heard some grumblings that they're trying to reduce the interstate age. The interstate age for truck drivers is 21. So
Yes.
you cannot drive a semi currently outside of your home state unless you're the age of 21 or greater. And you can't get a CDL unless you're 18. So from 18 to 21, you can only drive within your state's borders. But because there's such a shortage of drivers now, which again, ironically, may or may not have been caused by the e-log mandate, they're looking at ways to try and subvert that shortage. And one of those things is lowering the interstate age to 18. And I've actually heard grumblings that they're trying to make it where you could be as young as 16 to get a CDL.
Wow. So what's your thought on that?
Again, all these things are supposed to be for safety, but when push comes to shove, for some reason, these things that were so important for safety before are put by the wayside. And said, oh, well, we'll just overlook this. Well, was it really for safety then, or was it for generating revenue? So unfortunately, I hate to look at it pessimistically, but that's how I'm gonna look at it.
No, you're right on, because one of two things usually happens during times of acute need. Either you raise the salaries or you lower the expectations, right? So, and I think what happened here is saying, well, we're going to lower the expectations. You can drive longer, you can carry heavier loads, you can do this, you can do that, versus, like some salary boost. And again, we talked about this, Jonathan. I don't think anybody would have really been taken aback if the federal government would have come out in March or April of 2020 and said, over the road drivers, anybody with a CDL license who actively is driving will receive an extra $300 a week or something like that. I think people have been like, yeah, they deserve it. Like, that makes sense. Like, I'm looking at that saying, where's the straw man argument for that? Where's the people saying that's just garbage or whatever? So I don't think it's there. I mean, I think people will be like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I completely get it. Like, and so again, I guess a few things is I've been trying to bring awareness, and thank you so much for helping me to do this. I've been trying to bring awareness to people of over the road truckers. I mean, it's very difficult, right? It wasn't this panacea, it wasn't this utopia before 2020, but once spring of 2020 hit and the expectations that were put upon over the road drivers, which they carried out, with no help really from the federal government or from the states or even from municipalities, things like that, is horrendous. And as we look forward, like at this moment, like what could we do? Like we kind of talked about this brown bag campaign. I mean, which is just like something we threw out there and things like that. But I have a big cat like next to me.
Yeah,
this cat weighs 28 pounds, by the way.
Wow, so that's awesome.
It's a very big cat. And I can probably bring a picture of this cat on screen, by the way. We have a whole backstory for this cat, which is not authentic. We said this cat served in the Navy, which he did not. So we call him Navy Cat. He does not have any naval experience, but anyway, we do call him the Navy Cat. And let me bring up a picture so we can fully appreciate the size of this cat here. So here we are. I'm going to bring this up right now for those of you who want to learn more about this cat. So this is our cat. Yeah, that is a 26 pound cat.
That is right, awesome.
And he's sitting on a box, and he's good. He's really cool. He's a chilling out type of cat. Sometimes when I'll work downstairs in my office, he sits behind me on the chair and he just chills out. But as you would measure that cat, the cat is like easily 18 inches wide as the cat sits on that box. So
wow.
I call him the battleship because he kind of has that wide, low berth to him. Yeah, his name is Bojangles, by the way, and we call him the Navy Cat. But yeah, he's a good guy.
Love it.
Very good guy, but 26 pound cat. So just so we know that. So let me, as we get into the close here,
Yep.
Jonathan, and so on December 16th, 2021, so just over a month ago, the White House released it's titled the Biden-Harris Administration Trucking Action Plan to Strengthen America's Trucking Workforce. So anybody, can find it, right? So December 16th, the White House is this thing to strengthen our trucking workforce. So I went through it and I made a few points. Here's what I pulled out of this. One is they were going to put money into CDL licensure programs. What that means, I don't really know. They were going to increase apprenticeships. So let me just stop there. This seems like they really touted this. Like this is a big section in their whole plan. Like we're going to increase apprenticeships. What does that mean to you when I say that? Like, were people,
I've never heard of an apprenticeship in the trucking industry. If you're doing a quote unquote apprenticeship, that means you've got father or mother or some sort of close family member like that, and now you're going to be getting to drive truck too. So they're taking you out, showing you the ropes. And at that point, I don't think it's apprenticeship anymore. It's very few and far between that you meet anybody that's like, oh yeah, come on and jump in my truck. Complete stranger that just was like, I want to be a truck driver too. No, that's why they got truck driving schools now. And that's going to those licensures, which I would assume is just them saying, hey, we're going to go and throw money at these schools to try and get them to be able to pump out more students.
I think you're right on. So here's the document. I have it up on the screen. So fact sheet, the Biden-Harris administration. So they released this from the White House on December 16th. So a lot of it is right. It's just virtue signaling and saying, truck drivers are, a vital part of our economy and all that. So then they get into this thing down below and they're saying, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take steps to reduce barriers to drivers getting CDLs, which actually I don't think they're doing because the cost is going up. But anyway, that's what they're saying. And then their second thing is they're kicking off this 90-day challenge. I'm like, this is insane. Like, be respectful. But anyway, we're kicking off this 90-day challenge to accelerate the expansion of registered apprenticeships. And right now, like, as you've said to me, Jonathan, you're like, what does this mean? And this is kind of the reaction I've been getting. People are like, what? So they have 90 days to try to get more people in this apprenticeship program. And I'm like, so this is just garbage. At least in my opinion. I don't, if you're thinking like, no, this is okay. Like, yeah, please jump in. And then they're saying, here's another thing. Conduct veterans focused outreach and recruitment. There are approximately 70,000 veterans who are likely to have certified trucking experience in the last 5 years. And I'm thinking, that's not bad, but I'm not sure, like, I would be specifically turning to veterans returning from war to be CDL drivers. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think this is this is incomplete. What I'm looking at this saying, I don't think veterans are your answer to this. I mean, some veterans might decide that this is what they want to do.
I don't know. I think are they the end all be all answer? No. But you do have the aspect where these are men and women who are used to being away from home, being away from their loved ones, etc. So in that aspect, it would be an easier transition. Likewise, these are men and women who should be motivated by themselves, which is a huge aspect to being a truck driver. A lot of people don't realize that. You got to have a lot of self-motivation. And so, again, I could definitely see where vets would be a huge plus there. Okay. So I could definitely see where the idea sounds good. But at the same time, these are men and women who just spent how long overseas fighting, etc. I don't want to ask them to do something as selfless as, going fighting for our freedom, and then have to say, hey, you want to do something else that's completely selfless, go jump behind this wheel and
Right.
just be away from friends and family for a couple weeks at a time again, because this is the best we got for you. That seems like a kick in the nads.
It does seem like a complete, kick in the nads, or a line drive to the third baseman who wasn't paying attention, took it right in the nads. It's not good, Jonathan. I'm telling you that. So another thing they put in here is now. So first of all, like one thing I talk about on my show on Face Validity Fridays is when you get a lot of text, like in a proclamation, it's usually the proclamation is pretty useless at that point because they're just trying to overtake you with word salad and stuff. So here's something like they put in here. It's launch a joint DOT-DOL driving good jobs initiative, supporting drivers and ensuring that trucking jobs are good jobs is foundational for a strong, safe, and stable trucking workforce. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? I mean,
Yeah.
that to me, right, that's obvious. Like when you state the obvious, I mean, it's like saying the sun is warm. When the sun is out, it's good because we feel warmer. I mean, that's obvious. Like it's a connection. Like it's an axiom. It's an obvious. So to me, this is just garbage. As you said, and you're right on with this, things like if you go into CDL, right, either some hazard pay or something, like maybe you get a tax deduction, hypothetically, let's say, like if you have a CDL, you've been driving, you get $300 a month as a over the top tax write-off, right? So that's immediately there for you. I mean, that stuff makes sense. And again, it's like all of Americas are listening to this, and people, Bob, Vanessa, Bolo, New York Outcasts. I mean, none of us would be like, oh, that's preferential or this is whatever. It'd be like, no, like we get behind that. Like we understand it. Like we're there. Like we're totally on board with this. So, and then they list this thing here. I'm going to bring it back up. They put in the next 30 days, the DOL. I don't know what the DL is, by the way. I missed it earlier in here, so I don't know what that stands for. But the DOL and DOT will kick off listening sessions for drivers, industry, and labor leaders and advocates to hear their perspectives. Well, listening sessions, come on, that's garbage, right? Like, what you have to do. Like, don't hold a listening session. That is just, just crazy. Anyway, okay, so in the next 60 days, acknowledging that safety is the highest priority for truck drivers, the FMCSA will launch a pilot for drivers ages 18-21. It's mandated by the bipartisan infrastructure law. Jesus, I mean, just reading this, I'm like, come on, like, give me a break on this.
And that's where they're trying to expand the interstate age.
Right, so you can be younger and drive. And then, and then they're saying in the next 90 days, the Department of Labor will announce the results of the 90-day apprenticeship challenge and announce new partnerships. I mean, this is all useless, right? This is completely useless. I mean, I'm just like, okay, here's the deal. Like, immediately $300 a month over the counter, over the top, for a credit for CDL drivers who are actively driving. Boom, like right there, put that in. And, something where you're going to have, X designated National Guard to this number of rest stations in your, state, and you're going to provide, these essential items, right? Whether it be, maintaining the bathrooms or showers or basic medical or whatever, whatever it is, you're set. And then you're also going to do this campaign of getting civilians involved, which they did for mask, and 3D printers populations were involved. So let me ask you this: so Jonathan, if the 3D printing community was involved, what could the 3D printing community do? And you might say, like, I have no idea. What might the 3D printing community do that could benefit truck drivers? Like, what could they do? Or even like things that they could 3D print that you'd be like, this is really awesome that I have this now. But I want to put that out there because I have friends in the 3D printing community who printed masks, who printed ventilator parts and things like this. But if you're thinking specifically about trucking, was there anything out there that the 3D printing community could have contributed to in 2020? I have
That is
no idea on this.
that's tough. I'm really racking my brain here, but I don't want to say no because I'm sure there's something, and as soon as I say no, there's going to be somebody out there in the comments when we end and be like, "You're an idiot," and I'm like, "I know."
Right. And anybody in the comments, if you have any idea, because there's like Thingiverse and stuff like that, but maybe there's something that's completely obvious that we're all missing. That you're like, yeah, you could have obviously printed. I mean, silverware is maybe one of these things that they get NY Outcast with that. Right. I mean, silverware. Sporks. You could, right. This makes sense. Like Thingiverse. No,
but then again, from what I understand with the material that 3D printing is made out of, it's basically like cornstarch. So I'm not even sure how printing silverware would have.
I think I know quite a few 3D printers, and like Flying Rich, who was in here earlier. Like I think that could have been handled.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are 3D printing things because Rich has done stuff for like his pool and things like that, which would not have been water dissolvable and things like that. But I think you're right on with this. Like for example, a spork, because like even the restaurants we go to now, they're like, oh, there's like no straw, or there's no whatever, you know. But yeah, like you could 3D print hypothetically a spork. And you could have contributed that to these sites. Because again, I had a friend, Drew Bay in Florida, and Drew was printing 3D printing masks and donating them to hospitals throughout spring of 2020. But man, I mean, this is an awesome discussion.
I think I love it. Thought of one thing.
Okay.
And that would be just little things to go on vents that would help direct the air from your vents more. So whether it be to perhaps funnel the air, in the winter, so it's hitting your windshield in more direct areas when you're trying to run your defrost. Likewise, in the summer when you're got the air conditioner blowing, but you've only got so much control with your vents the way they are. Maybe a little vent thing to again, funnel the air exactly where you want it. I think that'd be a pretty neat idea.
That is awesome. So I'm going to call it air vent directional diffusers. Yeah.
There we go.
So people could have, right. And the thing is, I mean, you just throw that idea out and pretty soon the 3D community just gets together and they just like, they're buzzing in their hive and they're like, here it is. Like, here are 4 examples of it. And then like, tell us what works. Like, we'll get some of these printed. And they would do that. Like I mean, I know so many people in the 3D printing community, and they're all awesome people and giving people. And if you have that open code for them, and yeah, they could print some of these things out, they would do that. Mm-hmm. So I absolutely love that idea, Jonathan. Like that is, I just put a note over here on the left because for anybody, well, obviously I didn't share this at the start of the show, but I'm writing a journal article for Crisis Response Journal. And it is centered on what I think was our not only an incomplete, but a failed approach to over-the-road drivers during the, during spring of 2020 and then ongoing, right? And some ideas of how we could approach that differently in the future and things like that, which we've talked about tonight, which I think is incredible. Like no one's having these discussions. But that is amazing. Air vent diffusers. Yeah, absolutely. Like I have a friend here, Flying Rich. I don't know if he's still in the show right now, but he lives in Florida, and his pool cleaner that goes, underwater in his pool stuff, like the bearings went bad on it. And the thing was like 20 years old. So he took it apart and then he like put the bearing dimensions online and someone said like, well, hey, like here's a program that you can enter into your Ender 3 printer and it will print new bearings and use like this type of filament. And he did it and it worked.
Yeah.
And instead it cost him less than $2. And he said,
it was, you had like $40 for the new bearings. I think it was. That's a huge difference.
And so you think about those things, but we think about these things and also like, I think right now, I mean, people talk about the supply chain, which is authentic, right? Like I go into my local stores and I can see if there's not product. But we're also at this point in time, and I wrote about this in my book, we are between just-in-time manufacturing and 3D printing. Like General Electric wrote a white paper, and they said, like in 2 to 3 years, when you go to your local automotive part supplier. They're going to, and you say like, I need a water pump for a 2008 Chevy Impala. They're going to say, okay. And then they'll type it in and they'll hit print, and the 3D printer will print it off. And whether that takes, 20 minutes or whatever, and they'll say, here it is. Like, they're not going to go into their stock to get it. They're going to print it off for you. So I think we're at this weird point in time too, where we're kind of transitioning. But it's kind of an aside, but so let me get your take, as we round this out.
Yep.
How about like people thinking, well, truck driving, I get it, but Dave, like in 5 years, trucks are going to be largely automated. Truck drivers are going to be kind of a thing of the past, right? Kind of like a railroad, the firemen on the railroad who'd like shovel the coal and stuff into the engine. So they're saying, you know what, like, I get what you're saying, but we're kind of at this transition. Like in 5 years, we believe this is going to be automated either by truck or drone or whatever. So like we're not going to put a lot of effort into making the lives better for over the road haulers, which I've actually heard people say this, like, because it's kind of this thing that's going by the wayside through technology. I guess, what's your thought on that? Do you think in 5 years, half of the semis on the road are going to be automated, no drivers?
Well, and when I was still driving, this would have been 2016, 2017. They were saying, within a decade that all the trucks would be self-driving, everything would be automated, and there'd be no reason for truck drivers, which, when you started looking into it, I would tell guys, I don't know what you're so worried about. You're still going to have a job. You're just going to have a much easier job because these self-driving trucks, with at least the way the laws were being put in place for them and things like that, you would still have to have somebody there in the truck to manually override if anything were to go wrong. So at the end of the day, there's still going to be a guy in that truck. But we're almost 5 years into that now. So technically in another 5 years or so, they're saying, half the fleet is supposed to be going to these self-driving trucks and everything's going to be automated. I haven't paid as close attention to all that as I was when I was driving, so I can't say 100% on where that is currently. But from everything that I've seen and from the guys I'm talking to and things like that, I don't think it's going to be happening in the next 5 years. I don't think it's going to happen in the next decade still. I think they still got a lot of bugs to work out with that stuff. So at the end of the day, they still need to be focusing on the person and how we're going to take care of the men and women that are, keeping our country going.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Andrew S. wrote, we don't even have robot boats. Robot trucks are not coming anytime soon. And I think that's right. And I wrote about this in my book, The Velocity of Information, coming out April 11th, by the way. But I interviewed Linda Stone, who was a former vice president of Microsoft. And we were talking about, autonomous driving vehicles and stuff. And she's like, yeah, that's quite a ways down the road. Versus what we've been told, right? These studies are saying, if half the vehicles are autonomous, like it would decrease deaths on the highway by X number and things like that. She's like, that's all speculative, right? No one really knows that for sure, and we're pretty far off, from getting there. So yeah, in talking with you and kind of thinking about the truck driving industry, it reminds me of an interview I did of Robert Travis, who was a Alaskan crab boater in the early 2000s. And, he talked, one of the chapters in my book, when I interviewed him, the chapter title is All Four of My Bosses Are Dead. And it's true. Like, all four of his bosses on the boat died of injuries they incurred on the boat. And one of the discussions Robert and I had, so he's a good friend of mine. And, I said, what's the incentive to make the boat safer? And he said, there's this thing right now, right? Like, because if you own the boats, there's a reality that in 20 to 25 years, a lot of this stuff will be automated, like how the crab cages come on and off and all this stuff. So like the deckhands will kind of be phased out. So how much money do you want to spend in making this safer for the deckhands when you know in 20 to 25 years, you really won't have deckhands? So I'm kind of like, yeah, I kind of get it. Like we're at this transition point where people have to weigh like how much they're going to put into making things safer versus, well, when things are automated, which is this big assumption, right? And they have no idea how this will work, but they're just thinking these things will be automated in 20, 25 years. So it's this time too where, yeah, I think we're not putting as much into consideration of safety and just of people's well-being. But I guess it's even more than that, Jonathan. I just think I'll go back, and I think it's appalling, and it's I don't know if it's dehumanizing or less than human, how we forget about people. And I would say over-the-road drivers would be at near the top of this list, if not at the top, during the pandemic, right? During times of extreme uncertainty and chaos and stress and things like this, of not like looking out for these people and trying to make their lives better because they're essential to our lives. But I think there's probably this room which you and I don't have access to of these corporate executives saying, well, 25, 30 years, more things will be automated. So we're not going to invest this amount of money right now, even though we know this could improve the situation right now. We're not going to invest this. We're going to kind of put it toward the future. But I don't know. Maybe I'm a cynicist. Maybe Vanessa will say, Doc, come on. I've known you for quite a while. Our media hits, our good friend Swamp Dog Armory, who's doing an intermission video for future shows, would come in and say, Doc, come on. So I really like your idea here of these air vent diffusers. Like 3D printers could get on board with that. And, like I said, I think fairgrounds could have opened up in counties and said, hey, like, come here. They already have, they have a lot of space. Area for people to bring assets such as meals or socks or things like this. Bathrooms are usually there. So I just want to go through our notes here and make sure we kind of have everything covered. So which I think we do. Let me go through the chat and make sure. Vanessa is talking about titanium. I don't know what that's about. It's probably something they mine in Pennsylvania, not in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is mostly iron ore. Bolo is saying Outcast. Bolo's a great guy, but I'm not sure where Bolo's going right now. He's our good friend from Korea who lives in Canada.
Oh.
So yeah, Bolo's great. So actually, I appreciate the followers of this channel, of the show. It really means a lot to me week after week to see similar faces and the new faces in the chat. So
definitely.
And let's see here. This is I just missed it, right? Swamp Dog Armory, a bit pessimistic there, Doc. So tell me more what you mean about that. So I'm not sure what you're getting at, because my friend Swamp Dog Armory, who's younger than I am. Maybe it's just part of Doc's age. Like
Swamp Dog's a good dude.
Swamp Dog is a good dude. Yeah. And Doc is no spring chicken. So as I do a recap of what we covered today. So first of all, our guest Jonathan Berger, check out Guns and Barbecue. It is the pinned comment in YouTube right now. So just go up in the pinned comment. You're like, where can I find this guy? Awesome content. I have 3 monitors ahead of me. Like I work at night and stuff like this. I'm like, boom, on the right monitor. I'm like, Guns and Barbecue have a show on tonight? Yes. Okay, it's going up on the right monitor. Put Jonathan up. So Guns and Barbecue, that is the pinned comment. Go right there and subscribe. And just I mean, really genuine, serious about his content, very attentive to things like the metadata, like the what he's putting together for his thumbnail and for his shows and things like that. So very curated. So just very good, very good. And I appreciate it. And the guests that he has on. So this is one of those channels, I look at it and I'm like, okay, he's like, between 800 and 900 subscribers. I'm like, yeah, that will, I'll check back in 2 weeks and that'll be like 1,500, and then like it'll be like 5,000.
I wish.
No, but I completely believe, and it's rightly deserved. Like you have excellent content. You are, I don't know if I would, I guess I would say it's like the radio voice, like the inquisitive. So you're just very good at this. So like your channel, it's kind of funny because, the safety doc, safety is kind of a niche market. So to get to almost 1,200 subscribers has been a big thing for my channel. I appreciate so many people for doing that, because it isn't something where a lot of people are going to tune in just kind of innately to do that. And so when I have people on, or I see people's channels take off, like I'm genuinely happy, and I'm like, yeah, that's good content, because they put the research in, they do their due diligence with understanding the analytics and their audience and things like that, which is you completely. So like, so hopefully everybody who's following me goes over on the pinned comment and gets over to Guns and Barbecue, because Jonathan's a real deal. And so what we talked about today, this is something that honestly it hit me raw when it happened. When, for example, like here's $300 or $600 a month extra for unemployment and things like this and whatever, and I'm kind of like waiting, like, okay, so what's happening to the over the road haulers, which are, we're hearing supply chain and essential things coming in, and I'm like, okay, but I like these are over the road haulers, so what's happening? And it never came out. Like it never was, here's our campaign. It was basically saying, okay, like, we're going to allow you to drive longer. You don't have to take as many breaks. You can carry heavier loads, but it wasn't anything to genuinely benefit them. It was just relaxing the regulations, which I thought was horrible. And now, and honestly, I mean, like I said, I'm running for political office in my community. Vote for Doc on April 5th if you live where I live. But one of the things that I'm very overt on is, I said, we live by an interstate. We live by a large commerce section. We need to acknowledge and not only treat truckers better, but we need to take action on that. Not just that we say that we're going to do things, or a proclamation like truckers are welcome in our community. No, like we're putting together either a brown bag for truckers camp. I don't know what it looks like, but we're going to do something. And we're going to do it. We're going to be informed by people, by Jonathan and things like that. We're going to do something, because it's just the right thing to do. So as we talked about this, this show today, we talked about, before the pandemic, it was difficult for truckers to find a place to park. When their driving time was up, you drive along the waysides and the highways, you see waysides and how many openings. But a lot of these places were filled up, and that was before the pandemic. So we need to make more spaces available. So when people wake up in the morning, over the road haulers, and they're checking their windshield, they're like, oh, great, a $200 bill. That's, $200 fine. That's crazy. Like that needs to stop. And then the whole thing of ELD, these electronic monitoring, it's probably good to some extent, but also the fact of like, if Jonathan was in park somewhere and they're like, hey, like you need to move your rig a block over because we're doing whatever here. And the moment he moves the rig, it resets the timing mechanism and stuff. Like that needs to be adjusted. That needs to be tweaked. Like it is, it needs to have some human component to it. So while ELD, or this electronic tracking, the purpose of it, is to make sure that drivers are getting appropriate rest and appropriate sleep. There is some reality that needs to kick into that of saying, if I have to move my rig, 2 blocks because it's whatever, and then I go back and now things reset. That's ridiculous. And then also during the pandemic, March 13th, 2020, this emergency relief declaration came out from the U.S. government saying, hey, if your over-the-road hauler license is about to expire, don't worry about it. We're going to extend it like through November, stuff like that. And then like the 60, 70 hour rule thing was relaxed. 30 minutes break after 11 hours was relaxed, stuff like that. Okay, like that happened. We understand it, but then like what else happened to support truck drivers? Because you have two things that happen typically. Like you can increase wages, or you can decrease expectations. And what the government did clearly was decrease expectations. And maybe that had to be done. I don't know. I don't know what your opinion is on this, Jonathan. Did we really need to put all these things in place? Like, say you can drive with heavier loads and without a brake. I don't
Honestly, excuse me. Sorry. I think the biggest thing would have been just simply increasing wages. I don't know if it would have helped. The big thing for truck driving is making awareness. I never even thought about becoming a truck driver until I was at an eye doctor appointment one day, which really ironic now that I think about that. Literally at my yearly eye exam, and I was looking through the classifieds just for giggles, and I was like, truck driving school, and I was like, oh, that would beat making $8.50 an hour as a corrections officer. And I was like, all right, cool, I'll go to truck driving school. But if I didn't stumble across that, I had no idea how to become a truck driver, or that I needed to go to a special school or anything like that. So I think just making awareness on that, one, this is a really viable and easy industry to get into, and this is how you do it, would go just leaps and bounds. Because at the end of the day, then you can tell people, yeah, it costs $5-6 grand to go to truck driving school, but you're going to make probably somewhere between 40 to 60,000, depending on what you decide to do as a truck driver in your first year driving truck.
Right.
What job are you going to get with a college degree where you've only got $5,000 in debt and you're going to make 40 to 60 your first year? I'm not poo-pooing on college degrees or anything.
I'm right on. I completely, no argument, for me on that. I think you're right on. So one, I bring in too. So as a retired school administrator, like, there was so much emphasis. I'm teaching a class right now. I actually started today, by the way. So I'm teaching a class right now, and as high school seniors, right? Counselors are supposed to track seniors into a post-secondary career pattern, which is usually before your college and whatever. And universities report this information back to school districts and things like that. And if you are, let's say, like, you're a family farmer, right? Like, I'm 18 years old. We have a farm, which is 100 years in the family, right? And so I'm going to go into that. Or you're truck driving, or have a 3D printer and welder, whatever, like family business. That counts as actually a loss. And when the school district gets that back, that student went into the family business or went into these areas versus going into college, which is crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. And I'm looking at this saying, this is so screwed up. And, I'm very vocal about it. I think it's complete garbage. I think it's this mentality for a long time where, I don't know, the Department of Ed at the national level or the state universities have kind of made this of saying, hey, you got to go to university and stuff like this. I'm like, for some people, yes. And for some degrees, yes. But otherwise, no. And the fact is, though, if you say someone is going into over-the-road driving, or someone is going to take over their family farm or be a partner in that at age 18, you're counting that as a loss, which they do on these forms that come back, that's crazy. That is insane. So, it's just appalling. But
unfortunately, college is not for everybody. For some it is, and that's great. But for some, we're pushing kids to go to college and tell them you're not going to have a future unless you go to and get this 4-year degree. When we need plumbers, we need welders, we need electricians, we need truck drivers, we need so many skilled laborers out there. Where I think in the next decade or so, those are the jobs that are going to be available. And for some reason, we're not pushing trade schools.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I look at this, I'm like, this is crazy. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So we went through complete the recap here of access to things like, imagine, right? Just try to put yourself in the place of an over-the-road hauler in the spring of 2020 when you waysides are closed. You can't go to the bathroom at a wayside, right? Or you can't, and truck stops are closed. Or you go in and you deliver your load somewhere, right? And they're saying, "Oh, stay in the truck." Like you can't come inside because of whatever our pandemic procedures. You have to stay there because if you come inside, it violates the rules we put in place for outside people coming into our building. You're like, but I usually come in here, right? Or I need to come in here, use the bathroom, use your microwave, or just get around, or use the phone, or just warm up, or something like that, right? Because you're saying, again, people don't realize, the cab shuts off after 5 minutes. So like right now where I'm at, it's like minus 11 outside right now. So imagine that. Or like if you're somewhere where it's hot. I mean, but it's just crazy. And then we have this thing where the infrastructure bill comes out. This $2 trillion infrastructure bill, improve roads, highways. And part of it is, we're going to do like apprenticeships in over the road hauling and stuff like that. It's like, okay, I don't know what that really means. We've talked about that, but are you increase? And then, the Business Insider comes up, but said the issue is like, part of the issue is you have to increase places for truck drivers to park where they're not going to feel like they're going to be fined and stuff like that. And we need to provide more amenities and just more essentials for truck drivers, which thank you in Business Insider for doing that. We also talked about this thing too, of like, people don't realize it, but this thing of lumpers, LUMPERS, lumpers. As truck drivers, as you said, Jonathan, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we're often allowed to unload their freight, which then they received payment for that. So that ended during the pandemic because it would be considered a contamination risk, right? Like, hey, stay in the truck. Like we'll have
essentially,
right?
it's just the idea that, you could have COVID and, you're going to infect everybody here and we'll have to shut down. So you stay in your truck and this person, you're going to have to pay, X amount of dollars to now instead of saving that money yourself.
So so we're talking, as you said, up to $1,000 a week of lost income. And by the way, Armitage is saying, "Hey Doc, are you in one of those communities where we can show up and vote without ID?"
Yeah,
I actually don't know, buddy. And I'll tell you, if I win, I win. I have one opponent running against me, and I'm not. And the mayor called me and he said, "Dave, you can." Typically, people spend $500 to $800 on their advertising. I said, "I'm not spending anything. Like I'm spending my time like going out and meeting my neighbors and people in my district here and talking to them. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But there will be no yard sign, vote for Doc on April 5th. So yeah, if you want to independently film a commercial or do a radio post, I'm not against it. But if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Another thing too is we talked about it, Jonathan, and I wrote an entire chapter about this in my book, which will certainly be abrasive to some people, but I really skewered the healthcare heroes parades and the TikTok videos. One is I thought the parades were an improper use of government. A fire truck, a ladder truck is $1 million. I was a firefighter. A ladder truck is $1 million. So
Yep.
You take this positionality of millions of dollars of equipment to do this parade. Maybe I can understand it once or twice, but not every week for 3 months. And so that's part of this. I'm really in this whole thing of like, the TikTok nurse craze. And it's not only that, the nurse organization, which I cited in my book, I forget what the organization, which is largely the proponent of the nursing profession, not against nurses, right? But the organization should have come out at some point and said, knock this off. Like the truck drivers aren't doing this, right? The people who are stocking, warehouses, XYZ, they're not doing this, right? Stop this. Like, this is ridiculous. So I think there was this whole part of that really hit a nerve with me, and people didn't measure it themselves, right? Like that they wouldn't realize I shouldn't be doing this, because like if people genuinely are dying around me and suffering and things like this, like to do this seems really distasteful. So I was just pulling that juxtaposition because like you saw the healthcare hero parades be championed for nurses, but you never saw truck drivers doing like, some truck driver equivalent TikTok video. Like that just wasn't out there. It was never a thing. And anyway, and we talked about what could be done. We get this time machine with this DeLorean, which our friend in the chat here, Sast One Too Many, who has done the Cannonball Run, by the way, Jonathan. I don't know if you're aware of that, but
Really?
he has done the Cannonball Run in a Isuzu Impreza, by the way.
I might be a bit of a nerd.
So,
There we go.
right. That's awesome, buddy. So our friend Sass One Too Many has done the Cannonball Run. I think he averaged like 146 miles. This is factual information, by the way. But we get to this, and so two things. Like one, people say, well, that's past. We can't do anything to fix it. I'm like, okay, but we can forensically look at this and say, what could we have done in March of 2020 for over the road haulers? And as you said, came up with these great things like plastic silverware, socks, maybe a 3D printed thing to refocus your vents, a card, some basic food stuff, things like that. Boom, like right there. Those are some of the things. Post National Guard or volunteer organizations, Lions Club, Rotary, things like this, JCs at some rest stops, make those identified and say, if you're a trucker coming in here, whatever. CDL license, the federal government saying $300 a week if you have a CDL license and you're active, whatever. I think all those are very legit right there on top. In our closing things, we're saying, now the government has come out and said, oh yeah, CDL license starting February 7th, you have to take more courses to get a CDL license. I'm like, yeah, okay. Like to me, like that's not very welcoming to people coming into taking this as a profession if you increase the barrier to get into it. And then also December 16th, so a month ago, the White House released this fact sheet, which is a very long document. And I brought it up, and it's the Biden-Harris administration trucking action plan to strengthen Americans' trucking force. And they were saying, we're going to give money to CDL licensure programs. Okay, I guess. Increase apprenticeships. And Jonathan, you're something. I don't know what that really means. I'm kind of reading this like, what the hell does that really mean?
Yeah.
And then recruit veterans in trucking. I'm not against that, but I'm like, that can't be your sole solution, right? There's 70,000 veterans out there. We're going to turn them into truckers. I don't think that's the plan. And so the rest of it then just gets into word salad. So see, I think my hope in tonight's show was to make people aware of what's really kind of the baseline, what's really happening in over the road hauling, and you've been awesome in that. I really appreciate
Thank you.
what you brought to this, and then also the fact that it's unacceptable to just say, well, yeah, I guess truckers did get slighted, right? I guess they didn't get what they deserved. Okay, like that's true, but then like this point forward, we have to change that. I'm on it. I mean, this isn't hyperbole. I want to do things for over the road haulers in my community, whether that means after if I'm elected to political office, or if I'm not elected to political office, then I'll go through other means to do it. But I'm like, this is such an injustice to me. And the fact, again, we never hear about this. It's not David Muir on ABC. Oh, breaking tonight on the news is this, in the USA, escalations with Ukraine or whatever. Something. There's never a moment where, we really get into this. And the thing is, like, I honestly believe I know so many people, and you probably do too. I mean, who would just step up and say, yeah, I'll put this in my 3D printer, or yeah, I would volunteer time to, do this brown bag campaign and things like this. And I'm both excited and kind of appalled at the same time. And like I said, Jonathan, you've been an inspiration to me. You've really given me knowledge that I didn't have. I'm just a person who's like, oh, there's a truck driver, right? Like, I don't know until I learned about lumpers, and then I learned about this system, and you go, oh, you can only drive so many hours a day. Oh, and if you park, and you're forced to park because you can't drive any longer because of the ELD. If you park in an area that you're not permitted to park, you might wake up to a fine, and
Yep.
And like, how in the hell did states not waive these things? How did your governors, like our governor, I mean, how did they not just say between this time and this time issue a warning or just whatever? Or you don't find people like that's inhuman to me. It is completely, I guess, almost gross to me to when you're telling me that that's happening. I'm like, it's sickening. And I'm so yeah. But I have a great appreciation for over the road haulers. I think they're underappreciated. I think they've been extremely underappreciated as essential, designated essential people during the pandemic. So Jonathan, let's break a little bit. Tell everybody about your show, because you've been growing in your show. You've been doing regular content. What do you talk about? Why should people be like, hey, there's a Jonathan from Guns and Barbecue? Like, I want to tune into his stuff, which I think is awesome, by the way. So let people know about that.
Absolutely. Well, first, I want to give these two little nuggets out there to any truck drivers who might still be listening. And one is back in the day whenever I have to use the bathroom, and you'd undoubtedly be at a customer that would be like, yeah, we got that porta potty right over there. I never wanted to use a porta potty. And so I always ask, hey, is there a bathroom inside that all you employees use? And most of the time you get that, no, it's not for drivers. Drivers get the porta potty. At which point, I would just lay on this little excuse of I am allergic to the blue dye in the
Blue dye's horrible.
porta potty.
Jungle juice, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they'd be like, "What?" And I tell them I'm allergic to the blue dye. If it splashes up on me or anything, I'll break out in a terrible rash, which was normally enough to let them or get them to let me use the regular restroom inside. So whenever I've told that to other drivers, they're like, oh my God, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think about that before? So you're welcome. Feel free to use it. But keep in mind, if you do, treat their restroom inside with respect. That way you don't ruin it for everybody else. Also, we mentioned urine jugs before. If you're driving truck, you probably had to pee in a bottle at one point or another in your lifetime. Put a little bit of mouthwash in that bottle. And this will go a long way with the smell of it because, at some point you want to dump it. There's guys that will just throw them into a trash can. That just seems a little to me. But I've heard of guys getting tickets. They're stopped for the night along, at a rest area or something. So they, go to dump it off in the weeds, and next thing you know, state trooper pulls up, and then they're hitting them for disposing of hazardous waste. So,
Ooh, okay.
Yes. So take just a little bit of mouthwash, put it down in your Gatorade bottle, whatever you choose to relieve yourself in those trying times. And that way, when you go to dump it, and the officer says, "What are you doing?" And you say, "You're dumping my mouthwash." And because, I always chose one that was like green colored and had a strong minty smell. So one, if that ended up sitting in your cab all day, it's not going to be just that horrendous urine smell when you go to dispose of it. And two, in that off chance that officer were to ask you what the heck you're doing, when he comes over, it's going to smell like mouthwash. So you're welcome for that one too. Definitely recommend the mouthwash trick though. But going on to, my show and whatnot, I do 3 live shows a week. 2 of them are the Almost Nightly Firearms Expo, where we try and talk about things going on within the Second Amendment community, and perhaps it's issues plaguing our community, whether it be politically plagued or maybe it's just things going on within our community that we need to improve. That way we can be better. A whole list of things, but essentially if it has to do with the Second Amendment, we are going to touch on it at some point. Then my other show is on Saturdays. The Almost Nightly Firearms Expo is Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 p.m. Eastern time. And then the Saturday show is at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time, and that's just a barbecue chat where we just talk about barbecue and whatever else might be on our mind. But I think my favorite project that I've got going is 2A Women Wednesday. And with that, I try and interview a lady within the Second Amendment community each week. I say try because getting guests has been a little tough.
Okay.
It's just one of those deals where I feel like they see some random guy pop into their messages, and they a lot of times they don't even look at the message. If I like a lot of them I find on Instagram, and if I send them a message, I can actually go back and look through. I bet you probably 3/4 of the messages, and they all say sent still. None of them say seen. Well, I shouldn't say none of them, but those 3/4 don't say seen. They say sent. So, yeah. So if you do know a lady that is doing amazing things in the Second Amendment community, she could be a trainer. She could just be a mother who is teaching her children about gun safety, whatever it is. We're looking to promote amazing women within the 2A community. So, if anybody knows anyone that might want to come on the show, please have them get a hold of me. Because that is a really rewarding project, getting to talk to those ladies, everything that they're doing, everything that they have going on in their lives. It's incredible that the ladies that I have gotten to speak to have been able to take the time out of their busy days to, sit down for an hour and do an interview with me. So it's been an amazing experience.
Man, that's awesome. That is really cool stuff.
Thank you.
A shout out to one of our show regulars here, DLD After Dark. He's saying
Hey,
hello,
DLD.
Safety Doc. So DLD, and so I'm glad he's feeling better. I was checking in on him back when he was not feeling quite as well, and our friend Bolo in the house, and so I appreciate it. Yeah, I like your channel because it's I guess what I would say is genuine, and you're not into this marketing or like, hey, like, by the way, like, buy silver, is it an all or something like this, which, like, there are some shows I like, but I'm like, come on, like, allocate a minute to that, and the other whatever to content, like, I get it, like, whatever. I mean, I think you're great at this. So
well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Whenever, and by the way, like, even like your mic setup and everything, I'm like, oh my God, like, John is so far advanced than where I'm at here with my Yeti.
Let's say
my UBS.
The Blue Yetis are a great mic. Honestly, the Rode Podcaster mic that I just picked this up 2 weeks ago. I had another mic that, I mean, it did the job, and a lot of people are like, oh, it sounds great, you're fine, you don't need to get a new mic. And I was like, I know the audio quality that I'm looking for, and like after I got the new mic, people were like, oh wow, that's a huge difference. I was like, I know.
It's really a good mic. No,
Thank you.
I need to sit down and figure out how to do a non-USB mic setup here. So I don't know. This is okay, but I now that I do more of this, so a little bit, obviously, if you're here with the doc, you probably know this, but if you don't, let me put this out in front of you right here. So this is I'm like right here as I hold it off, like off screen, right? Hell of a job there, Doc. You've got this stuff. This is my book, School of Errors, Rethinking School Safety in America, released in 2019. This is the most honest book about the $3 billion school safety industry. I actually took this and built it into a PBS presentation. Yeah, so I've been on PBS TV twice. You guys probably know that, but if not, you just type my name in plus PBS. Those are awesome presentations. Those are PBS specials that I did. And my new book is The Velocity of Information. God's sake, I'm tied into this. The Velocity of Information, Human Thinking During Chaotic Times. And it's a mind blast, right? So it is 208 pages. I interviewed like Larry Lawton, America's biggest jewel thief. And one of the questions I asked Larry, I'm like, hey, how'd you find out about 9/11? You know, a guy who was in like solitary confinement for like half his time in prison. Like,
Oh, yeah.
In a telephone booth in a dark room for half his time in prison. And he's like, God, no one ever asked me that before. So, you know, going through and all these interviews and the research and 471 endnotes, basically, oh God, like it's a lot to read. No, they're all done at the end of the chapters. So like you just go and you'll read and it'll be like number 1, number 2, number 3. Like it's really fluid. It is awesome. Like I had a graphic artist design diagrams for me. I'm trying to think of something like, you know, I'd like a diagram and we put these diagrams together. This book is awesome. Comes out April 11th. So again, velocity of information, you can just type it in my name or like go to velocityofinformation.com. It's published by Roman and Littlefield, so scholarly publisher. It's international, right? But it is a book that honestly, if it's ripping the bandage off the year 2020, one of my first chapters is essential versus non-essential and how insane that was, right? That we all woke up when we went through that. And then, you know, kind of going through the book. And the thing is, if you read the book, you get ahead of the curve and get yourself and your family out of harm's way with chaos. Honestly, I do not think anybody would publish this book a year from now. I think it would be canceled. Even now with my publisher, it was a risk. Like my work as a university professor, like this was a risk to take this on. It is an outstanding work. The running for mayor of Los Angeles, Kevin Dalton, you know, said it's, you know, a lot of us never realized we were enlisted like into this army to fight this unseen warrior, like in the pandemic. And it's going to infuriate you once you read this book, but it's essential reading. Yeah, I guess some self-promotion there, but the velocity of information is absolutely incredible. I spent easily 2,000 hours putting this book together. Releases April 11th, and I have the audiobook coming out. That will be at a later date, but it's being recorded now. And I'll have more information coming out about, but it is a major media or major actor who accepted this role. And part of it was after reading the book, he said, I'd want to do this because this is just important work. So like the fact we were able to negotiate him in at a reduced rate that we would have never been able to do, you know, had we just proposed this, right? He said, no, this is important. I want to do this. So I'm so thrilled that this will be out in an audiobook. Like I was working over the weekend. It's coming out through Findaway Voices. So we're distributing to libraries and internationally, things like that too. And, you know, like I'm excited. Like it's an awesome work. It's at the right time. All of you, like Juan, you know, Sassone Too Many, Jim, Dirt, Bolo, you know, you guys are going to resonate with this, right? Swamp Dog Armory, you know, Guns Barbecue, you know, Jonathan, and so it's one of these things where it's kind of risky, right? Because you write it and you're on the cusp of cancel culture, you know, when you come out with a book like this, and so much risk. But my publisher stood with me, my university stood with me, and really the work had to come out. And there is a chapter in there, again, we read it early up, essential, non-essential, and I kind of touch on some of the things we talked about tonight. As I go on and I talk more about this, as I do more interviews about this, I am going to make people more aware. Again, I'd say, well, let's think about how we treat truckers, right? And also like why we have this big, how did we miss this? How did we not do something more for truckers, especially in spring of 2020. So yeah, I sit here kind of embarrassed and also like, I'm like, but also like, this is a very valid show. Like this is extremely important content. Jonathan's a brilliant guy, right? Like, so my ability through my network here of somebody to send him a message and say like, you know, Doc's trying to do this show and stuff has made me a smarter person, made me more informed. As I go forward, it's going to change things that I do. So, but again, it is the pinned comment of Guns and Barbecue. That's how you can subscribe to John. He is approaching 1,000 subscribers. So get him there. And I kind of say it with a chuckle because like get him there, and then he's like launching, launching into thousands of subscribers and like holding up the blue, or not the blue, the silver, like YouTube 100,000 subscribers. Like you're headed there. I'm happy for you. Like I'm really happy for you. I can recognize it. Like it's like this channel's going, like it's going to rocket off. And
Thank you.
At some point, like people will like, Google channel, they'll be like, oh, he was on the safety doc like back then and stuff like that. But no, he's a great guy. Again, solid content, just really has a perspective, multi-perspective of what's happening. So as you listen, it's one of those things you turn on and you could continue to drive. You're not going to change a channel. You're going to be brought in by what's happening. So, and I don't say that to everybody. I mean, people who know this show, like Swamp Dog Armory and Juan, Marty, Sass, and stuff like that. Like I'm appreciative of my guests, but I'm like, oh my God, like you are just, I mean, you're so dialed in, Jonathan. And like, for me, like, I just appreciate that. And because like, we can't go to the mainstream media. We can't go to these other places we would traditionally go to get information. Yeah. But we go to you. We go to other people out there. Bacon Maldito, for example, is Friday night, 10 p.m. Central Time show. And suddenly you're getting information that's authentic, and you're getting guests who are authentic and dialogue and stuff like that. So I appreciate it. I love your work. Like I said, before we prepped for this show, like we had a conversation, I'm just wildly taking notes and putting things together. I'll have a blog post out tomorrow. It's John's at Guns and Barbecue. It is the pinned comment. And for those of you, oh my God, we have 43 likes for this show. So
wow, that's awesome.
It is. So let me go through the chat to make sure we don't have anything else in here. So this is House Cat saying, there's no need to fear the war. Most of us will want to see. We'll be prophetic. I don't know, but yeah, it's not good in the Ukraine. I interviewed Nikolai Razavayu on my show and also wrote a chapter about him in my book, The Soviet Cyclist Who Cycled in Kyiv, which is in the Ukraine. So we'll see what happens with that. Night Swamp Dogs, this is Sport Brand. Thank you, Sport Brand, for coming over. He's at $8.90 now. This is Bacon.
Oh, nice.
Saying he's tracking your stuff. And yeah, I'm sure Bacon will also give you a shout out.
Bacon's a good dude.
Crossed over 1,000 a few weeks ago, and Bacon has adhered to his regular schedule. He is a good dude, yeah, and actually, like, his blog posts are very good. I don't know if he's released one recently, but I was looking through a couple of his blog posts, and I think I contacted him like a year ago. I'm like, oh my God, like the way that you analyze this is really thorough, like really intense. And I actually said, I couldn't do this. Like what you did on this, like I forget what the piece was. Bacon might know, but I'm like, this was really well done. Boris is saying, what's the name of the stream John wants to do with a girl? What, do you know what he's talking about here, John?
It's called 2A Women Wednesday. So it's the number 2 followed by the letter A, Women Wednesday. There's actually a whole playlist over on my channel. There's, I think, 10 interviews now that I've done with different ladies in the Second Amendment community on that playlist. And every one of them is just incredible. I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything. Those interviews are all made that incredible by those ladies. Each one of them just doing amazing things.
That's awesome. So I posted it, and Jim McIntosh is saying, I love Smoking the Bandit movies. Damn it, Jim. Yes. So do I. And so does Jonathan. And Burt Reynolds, it's a hell of a thing that he passed. But we will always have that. And Jackie Gleason is good. Swamp Dog Armory, our good friend, is saying, yes, indeed, Martin. But things I'm not sure. Swamp Dog is a good friend of the show here. Now you're 893. My God. So wow. Jonathan, you're flying through the roof.
Well, I appreciate the bump.
Bull Rush, our friend in Texas, is saying the safety doc never called me anything better than I don't know. Bull Rush is a good guy, but he did receive several 22-inch monitors from his employer, and they just basically told him to keep them instead of send them back. So Dirt McGirt is in the house. Robert Ribbit Harrison. Jonathan, I don't know if you're aware of this, but he is a big proponent of zero weight oil in any conditions, especially when it's cold outside. But the guy is completely zero weight oil. Like that's his thing.
All right.
You can talk anything with them, politics or whatever, and they.
By the way, do you know about zero white oil?
You know about zero white oil, and you'll be like, hey, like I'm talking about barbecue. He's like, one of the best things for a grill is zero white oil. So I'm like, yeah,
nothing
I'm
will
not arguing with
season your grill the way zero white oil will.
Zero white oil and oak is, it's how it's been.
I like it.
Done up until the 20s, and then it kind of went out of fave, but it's back right now. Thanks. This is from Swamp Dog Armory. Thanks for the love, guys, and shout out to Doug. So, thank you to Swamp Dog Armory. We appreciate him. And as I go through here, so my God, I just appreciate this. Sesta, no oil is a new zero white oil. Yeah, no oil and no air filter. It's kind of the last thing you can do before you retire your vehicle. So, so everybody, you can find me. It's real easy, like the show here, safetyphd.com. I did update my website, so because it wasn't showing up in YouTube, and I got spammed by a pseudo pharmacy site in fall. So like if you typed in the Safety Doc or the Safety PhD, it would bring up like Vialis or Viagra or Cialis or whatever. And I'm like, that's not really part of the show here, so and I can't help you out. Like if you send me, I can't do anything for you with that. But so then when they went in and cleaned out the channel, right? They cleaned out the website. They also changed. So when Google and other sites would scroll the site, they wouldn't scroll the content. I forget what it was. I learned about it. So then I went in and I had to correct that in the last couple of weeks. So now it's starting to show up more. But safetyphd.com, all the podcasts, 168, including this one, going back, everything is in leveled audio. So if you download it and you're like, hey, I've got a long ride, I want to listen to this level audio, there's a blog post, maybe 3-4 minutes, if you want to go in and check that out. The 2 books, one is, you just type my name, check in Amazon. But right here, School of Errors, which is the most honest book about the $3 billion school safety industry, right? Hundreds of libraries across the world. It's in Nigeria. My goodness. It's in Squamish, British Columbia. And actually, like, just throw it in the back of your favorite, like, truck driver, like, just throw it in the back of their truck. And then when they get there, they'll deliver it and it'll be there. But, and the Velocity of Information, releasing April 11th, which is the best work I've ever done in my life. And I'm just thrilled with that book to be out there. It's mind-blowing. But yeah, check it out, The Velocity of Information. You can order it now. So I've been really thrilled with that. So enough about me, though. How about, Jonathan, as we close here, people who want to find you, where will they find you?
You can find me over at Guns and BBQ. Excuse me, that's how it's spelled, is Guns space N space BBQ. That's my YouTube channel. There's also the Guns and BBQ Instagram page, which I think it's actually, because believe it or not, there's quite a few different channels that use the name Guns and BBQ or Guns and Barbecue or Guns and things like that. So I think the Instagram, if I remember correctly, is Guns and BBQ on YouTube. If I remember correctly, because otherwise it's going to have to be something really goofy. So I was trying to make it as least goofy as possible. There's also the Guns and BBQ Facebook page, which if you go to my About section on my YouTube channel, there's links for all those things. So you just click on the channel, click the About tab, and then you'll find the Instagram, the Facebook, all kinds of stuff, email, you name it. All right. So once again, it is really cold there, and every once in a while he's got to restart stuff. So while we're waiting for everything to come back online, I would like to remind you about Zero Weight Oil. Zero Weight Oil will season your grill like nothing else will. I think he's still gone. So, in the meantime, while we wait for the doc to come back. Oh,
I'm back.
There he is. All right. I made a plug for Zero Weight Oil. It's pretty good.
Which you should, because it is the best. We now have our first vehicle in our household which runs on zero weight oil. So far so good. But yeah, we'll see how that turns out. But yeah, so I love zero weight oil. By the way, I'm sold on zero weight oil. So I did ask Robert Ribbit Harrison, who is a mechanic who knows this stuff. So like I put my trust in him for my zero weight oil sport brand. Yeah, all you guys. So I just asked Bacon. I said, Bacon, can you find Jonathan's Instagram channel and post it to Facebook? So hopefully he's doing that. Apparently, we have some very bad news here from Solitude Surfer, who has not had a good night, who apparently has stayed with us despite intestinal challenges.
Ugh.
And at that point, buddy,
Poor fella.
I just tell you to take care of yourself. Do what you have to do and just exit the show, and you can hit it on a replay. So I don't know what is out with that, but yeah, it's our good friend Sasso to me. So so this is from Bolo. Bolo is our representative in Canada, saying thank you, Jonathan, for representing. And I also believe, Jonathan, thank you for representing the discussion which needs to be had and needs to be amplified regarding over-the-road haulers. Again, not only related to the pandemic, but especially amplified because of the pandemic. So this is a good show. This is Robert saying, I love it. Google got the gavel according to level 1 text. I don't know what that means, but yeah. Who dat, says Bob. I don't know what that means. Bob says, what's up, Doc? Welcome back, which is great. I'm going to use this as a commercial laugh. Go for it, Robert. I have no copyrights. I'm sure that our good friend here, Jonathan, is willing to give up anything you want to pull.
Absolutely.
From the show.
Go for it.
You want to make a highlight video out of this, a 30-second TikTok that gets 4 million views. You're all for it, buddy. I will never challenge you on that. You're all good. DJ Play Nice, if you can snag it that way. If not, it's Guns and Barbecue on YouTube. I don't know what that means, but yeah, find Guns and Barbecue. Juan is our good friend. Juan's been hiking like crazy, by the way. He's been posting a lot of pictures on Instagram. He's been hiking all these trails out in I don't know, Nevada, Arizona, California and stuff, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So but every day he's posting all these places he's been hiking. So Sass says, if the vehicle says change oil every 10,000, change it every 5,000. I agree. I always change my oil sooner than later. I don't know if your thought, John, but I'm not. Oil's cheap, replacing an engine, not cheap. Take me some Pepto. Oh my God, you guys. Jim McIntosh, good friend. How many fuel savings will be gained by switching to zero weight oil is everything. Guns and Barbecue knows it. A lot of people don't know this, but Jonathan exclusively uses zero weight oil and applewood chips when he's making brisket.
That's right.
Awesome. So
say zero weight oil is the only way to go.
The thing is, you got to make sure it's kind of just a 1/4 inch, because if you go a little heavier than that, it can ignite, or lighter fluid and stuff like that. So you got to be careful. But yeah, zero weight oil is it's one of those things the government never tells you about all the purposes of zero weight oil. Let's say it can be a laundry detergent, and stuff like that. And but yeah, so make your lawn shine and things like that. Riggs Jr., who we haven't seen before, Riggs in previous podcast, but he's saying, you guys use new oil. My daily driver gets a new filter annually topped out with oil. Yeah, I don't know, buddy. Riggs, you're the guy. House cat, I'm dead. Ouch, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm allowed. It's the end. So Bacon, can you post Bacon? Bacon, can you post the links to Instagram or Facebook for Guns and Barbecue? I'd appreciate it. We got a Kojak with a Kodak. I remember that from the 1970s. A Kojak with a Kodak is a police officer with a radar gun. A Kojak with a Kodak. So
nice.
Yeah. So a little bit.
And that's the one thing that stinks from when I was driving. Most guys did not have CBs turned on anymore. There's a lot of guys that didn't even have CBs anymore. So a lot of that old trucker lingo, I never got to be privy to. Oh
my God. So, yeah, I had a CB. So I was a flag buddy, FALG buddy. I had 2 American flags on my 2 side antennas on my Plymouth Duster. I was flag buddy.
Nice.
So, and I cut a hole in my dash to install my CB radio, which looking back was a risky move. But I did sell it to someone who thought the CB radio was an asset and paid a little more for the vehicle because the CB radio was built into the dash. But yeah, actually looking back at that, that was a very dicey move. This is Bolo saying truckers earn more respect they earned it. Obviously do. Yes. Robert, I'll do something funny. That's a good from SAS One Too Many who did the cannonball run. You don't switch to zero weight oil. Newer cars call for it. You'll wreck a conventional engine with it. Yeah, our car has to have it. Trying to get through. It's incredible here. Closer tolerances for lighter weight to avoid starvation. This is Phil Henry from Germany, by the way. Phil is in Germany. Phil saying, really appreciate the show tonight. Thanks for great insight. Thank you, Phil. Phil also shared with me today through a personal message. There was a university, like a school shooting at a university today in Germany, and that's very rare. It doesn't get covered very much. But yeah, our friend Phil Henry there from Germany. Breaker, 10-4, 10-4. I think 10-20 is. It's like, where am I right now? Riggs carries zero weight oil in an empty card slot in his wallet. Yeah, zero weight oil is like you just carry it with you wherever you go. Anybody know of any good videos for tuning a CB? Looking at anyone, I don't know, but I'm sure you can find one. So
yeah, there's all kinds of them out there. It gets a little hairy though. If you can find a CB shop around you, that's going to be your best bet, because then you get into some of the stuff with your coax cable, things like that. You want to have that stretched out as much as possible. You don't want to have it, wound up a bunch and tucked behind a bunch of stuff.
Wow, that is crazy. Ham radio crash course. Yeah. Wow. It sounds like we should have Nick Schulander in here. So I had a CB in my Pontiac. All right. And last one here is real men used smoke signals, or was it semaphore or something like that? I think I wrote about it in my book, but yeah, back in the old days. So, all right, let me get the banner off here so we can wrap things up. So this has been the Safety Doc podcast. So those of you who've been listening, we have 168 of these out there, and they're all available at safetyphd.com in video and audio, leveled audio, and then also blog posts. So, and if you go through, you're going to find interviews of awesome people like Jonathan, or you're going to find like solo shows that I, did myself, and you might be like, hey, here's like, 10 or 15 shows I want to download, I want to listen to. And you're going to get straight information, right? There's not going to be a bias coming with here. I'm going to cite stuff out. So I think it's some pretty cool stuff. It's not everybody's jam, but like I had somebody email me and say, hey, I listened to every show that you did. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, I can't give you a year or a week of your life back. They're like, no, I was really into it. But that's kind of thing. I really enjoy this. I'm so fortunate, Jonathan, for you to be a guest and giving me all this time tonight.
No, I'm really honored. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Check out Guns and Barbecue, everybody. And again, this is Safety Doc Podcast. I have 43 thumbs up. So thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you for sharing the show. Thank you for the watch hours. Just everything that all of you do. I look forward to this show, for weeks. Having Jonathan on, and I'm excited to go in and to put the blog post up tomorrow. Again, just such a great guy. This has really been a terrific show, and all of you in the chat, helping with things that we kind of we're covering in the moment, and you're like, how about this angle? So talking about that. So this is Safety Doc. Thank you, everybody, and I will see you all on Friday morning for Face Validity. So this is the Safety Doc and our good friend Jonathan Berger at Guns and Barbecue. It is the pinned comment up above. Check that out. Subscribe. Guns and Barbecue. So thank you, everybody.